The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
All right, I'd like to call this, first we have a special board meeting. I'd like to call that to order. And before we begin, I would like to remind members of the public they can view the board agenda and handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at www.gbaps.org. If you click on our district across the top and then Board of Education on the left, you'll see a menu link called Agendas and Minutes. This link will take you to a website called Neptune, where all board agendas, minutes, and handouts from board meetings are housed. Also tonight, the board will provide our community with 2 different opportunities to speak before the board. All speakers must fill out a form indicating their desire to speak. If you wish to speak during tonight's open forum, you may do so with respect to items that are posted on tonight's agenda or any other matter you wish to share with the board. Please know that Wisconsin's open meeting laws prohibits the board from conducting business on matters brought during this open forum. The board will also permit public participation during agenda items that the Board of Education will be voting on as noted on the board's agenda. During this public participation time, consistent with state and federal laws, board members may engage in dialogue with the speakers. In order that all voices are heard, the board will suspend engagement until all speakers have had a chance to speak. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. The timekeeper will let you know when your 5 minutes has ended. Prior to starting your comments, please provide your name and address. Lastly, demonstrations during public comments such as clapping or cheering in response to either public comments or statements made by board members are prohibited. We have one item on our special board meeting tonight, and I would entertain a motion regarding public comment regarding district hires during our board meetings.
There should already be a motion on the, I think there's already a motion on the floor. Isn't that where we left off?
It was withdrawn. I thought it was withdrawn.
It was withdrawn.
No.
I will make a motion. I move that public participation be limited to open forum on or related to district hires.
I would second that. Are there any comments?
You can't read that again?
I move that public participation be limited to open forum on or related to district hires.
Okay, I'm pretty sure the way that was stated, that would be getting rid of all public input except open forums about district hires. Huh?
Read it
Well,
again.
oh.
Read it again, please.
I move that public participation be limited to open forum on or related to district hires.
I think that does need some adjustment, and I understand
Okay.
the intent. But however, when we look at how we have revised the entire hiring process, particularly for
It disregards
higher
that.
administrative positions, what have you, there are many opportunities for public participation that I think the way that's worded would discount those, so.
Can I rewrite it that public participation on the evening of hires, or it's essentially limiting public comment to the open forum portion of the board meeting rather than immediately prior to voting on a hire?
Something needs to narrow it down to specifically address the fact that we're talking about public meeting time, that this would not include participation in the various committees. This would not include the public's right to address the board individually, whether personally, through phone calls, through written communications, what have, that it's really got to be narrowed down.
Can we then indicate that public participation be limited to open forum on or related to district hires acted or voted on at the board meeting?
Can I ask a question? Katie, is your intent, though, I hear what you're saying, but your intent is not to limit the public from calling you or?
Not at all. My intent is.
Completely understood, but
Right.
I wouldn't want there to be any
Sure.
confusion in that, or have it
Right.
look like
It is
it's a
vague.
gray area, or to have room for misinterpretation, to suggest that we don't want public input. That'd be the last
Right.
So
thing
you
I'd want to
just,
say.
you want your motion to apply only to board meetings?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Could you just say
So
public?
with respect to school board meetings, is that what you're saying?
The intent is to limit public comment on the night that we are going to be voting to hire people, to limit the public comment to the open forum portion of the meeting and not immediately preceding the actual vote.
So I have to do a point of order here. So I'm looking at the minutes of the September 17th board meeting, where it clearly says, Becker moves, seconded by Dorff, to postpone to a definite time, which would be to be placed into the December 2018 meeting cycle, while there was a motion and an amendment on the floor. So, unless that's wrong.
Wasn't it, you're right, I do recall that, Andrew, but I thought subsequent to that it was withdrawn.
It was with, so here, I'll just read it. So, Sitnikau moved, seconded by Becker, that the board continue with the process that we have in place when it comes to public comment and board meetings and agenda items. Maloney moved to amend the motion to read that the public comment of Board of Education meetings continue as practice with the exclusion of district hires. Then there was a unanimous consent to clear the table. Then Sitnikau moved, seconded by Becker, that continue with the public engagement opportunities as described in the document. And where'd it go? And I got it again, sorry.
Was the clearing of the table?
The
withdrawn?
table was cleared, and then a fresh motion was made, which was Sitnikau moved, seconded by Becker, to go with the public engagement opportunities, referencing the script, which was read into the record. And then there was I think that's what and then Maloney moved an amendment, seconded by Dorff, to include the wording with the exclusion of individual personnel matters. So I think that's that's already exists on the table, and that's what we have right now.
Do you know, Melissa?
I mean, you're gonna have to go with what the minutes say. I thought that it was withdrawn. It was my recollection, but we'll have to go with what the minutes say.
Yeah, I did that word for word.
I mean, we did withdraw some attempts at motions. But then I think we made this motion because the initial motions were, what do you really mean? And then so we said, okay, we mean the script. So I think there's probably already an amendment that would either pass or fail that has the line with the exclusion of individual personnel matters. That would go under in the third paragraph, so it wouldn't have anything to do with open forum. It's in the second paragraph.
So then,
So-
if there's a motion out there, the motion would be saying that we would continue with the processes we put in place regarding public participation at meetings, both open forum and agenda items, with the exclusion of personnel matters.
So you would have to deal with the line with the exclusion of individual personnel matters. That would have to pass or fail, and then we'd have a whole motion to either pass or fail, but those motions already exist.
Are we- Can we amend that amendment? Because if we say with the exclusion of individual personnel matters aside from the open forum.
Well, it says this wording would be added to the end of the first sentence of the third paragraph, which would say the board will, the second paragraph says you can talk about whatever you want during open forum.
Right.
Third paragraph says the board will also would go into the part where it says during agenda items, so the
Okay, then I
wording
would
of,
stick
so,
with the exclusion of,
Yeah, so the wording would be the board also will permit public participation during agenda items that the Board of Education will be voted on as noted on the board's agenda with the exclusion of that amendment,
individual
the exclusion of
hires.
individual hires. Is that what it said?
individual personnel matters.
Individual personnel matters.
Okay.
okay,
And that was an amendment that we didn't vote on.
that was tabled.
Right.
That
That
was-
we tabled.
That was postponed to a
Right.
motion that also, so the
We
whole
didn't-
thing just.
yeah.
Okay.
So we have to take up the amendment first,
Thank you, Andrew.
which is essentially what,
I said thank you, Andrew.
yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Yes,
So we'll take up the amendment first. And then the motion will or will not include that amendment, depending on how the vote goes.
okay.
You good, Sandy? Okay, you got what you need for writing the amendment? Okay,
Yep, it's in the minutes from September 17th.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Are there any other comments, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote no on the amendment. It seems to me for something, if someone's going to come and talk about something, there's open forum anyways, and it just seems to me to be better to have more public input than less, and to start cutting out one chip here, one chip there from things that have more public comment. It just, I think there's more harm than good from a perception standpoint, and I think in reality, it's so overwhelmingly likely that people would get that viewpoint expressed publicly at open forum, in social media, some other way. It seems to be putting a lot of effort into something that I think is unlikely to make much difference. People are able to speak about prospective hires anyways. This just changes the time of day at which they can do it slightly.
And to that point, the time of day, I think, is relevant to access for the public in the first place. 5:30 p.m. is not an ideal time for most people to come to this meeting. I would be more open to this idea if we actually started our meetings at 6:30 or 7 p.m. The average parent, person that works, is either coming home from work, still working, taking their kids somewhere. I think if we're truly open to public comment, I think we have to be very careful about using the word limit, because we already limit public comment. We time the community. We are not allowing abusive speech. That is the job of the chair. If you look through open meetings laws, that's stated specifically in there very clearly. So I don't think that, first of all, we can't, if we're going to allow it in open forum, we should be allowing it at that time for time constraints with families, with community members to begin with. Also, I would question, what I've looked into is the content neutrality of, you can't say anything and you can't say anything negative. you know, in a court of law, a lot of times it can be carried out that you actually can't say anything positive either. And so I think as a governance body, we have to be really careful about what we're trying to avoid, because I think by doing this, we're going to create a bigger storm than if we allow people to come in and have their say at a time when we are about to vote on it. I think the 5:30 time, it's not something a lot of people can make. I know there was a comment about people being able to be part of the process, but that's not reality, and that's just simply not true for a lot of people. They're not allowed to come and be part of the hiring process for various reasons. They may not even have kids in the district. They may not be able to come and be part of those committees that happen during the day. I think we have to be really careful. This feels very much like viewpoint discrimination, and I think I would not support the amendment either.
Christina?
I will also be voting no on the amendment. I think, you know, we live in a time where people feel, whether it's real or imagined, that their voice is being suppressed and that their participation in democracy is being suppressed. And I think these conversations have been robust. We've spent a lot of time on this topic, but I still don't see any evidence to change a policy. Fear is not evidence. And if there is additional evidence that I should be considering, I would be open to reviewing that. What the evidence shows to me is that we as a governing body and as a district need to do a better job improving the strategies to bring diverse voices and perspectives into the conversations earlier, more strategically and more collaboratively. I think we are, quite frankly, blaming community members by trying to limit their voice instead of turning the lens on ourselves. And I think we can do a better job. I call for more introspection, but the evidence to me doesn't show that there's anything that we need to change. I think we can do better, and within that, we will see a better process.
My concern is with having it posted as input before our hires. It's at the 11th hour. So this entire process that was very well spelled out in the new policies that we adopted last month gives you know, there's no question in those policies that we want community input. I would rather have, if people have concerns and want to have input on hires, I would have that, much rather have that input before the board meeting when we're being asked to vote. And I think by putting it there, it says, oh yeah, we want your input, and they come to give their input, and then if we still vote, you know, to hire, we haven't had any time to take into account their input, because we haven't had time to look into things or whatever the case may be. You know, I think people can certainly have the option always to call board members. They can call us and have their input that way. So anyway, that's just my concern with advertising, that we want people at this moment in our meeting to come with their input when it's really difficult to take that input into account in the moment of when we're being asked to vote on a hire. Rhonda?
But I think we have to be careful about that. It's not really about us. It's about the community that we serve, the taxpayers that pay our paychecks, the invested parties that actually are out there that maybe get the agenda on Friday and see that there's a name, that as a citizen have a First Amendment right to come and sit there and actually let us know how they feel. I don't believe we're going to have a ton of people doing that. I don't see, like Christina mentioned, we don't have a lot of evidence to show that we have to take care of this right now. You know, we have a lot of urgency for things in this district that really, you know, matter. This to me, and there's evidence to show that we need it, but in this instance, our fear of something that may or may not happen really can't prevent the community from being able to have their voices heard at a time when they should be allowed to. I mean, if we're going to take away this opportunity before we vote on this topic, you know, we should be doing it with everything, all or nothing. Otherwise, we are restricting something on content. That, I mean, I think we have to be really careful about that. again, I think what we are afraid of, I'm not sure what we're afraid of exactly, to be honest with you. But being able to come forward, the leadership of a building is of public concern, as it should be. It's their school district. I think we have to remember that the public that's out there now is not the same public that was out there when you were first on the board. It's not the same public interest. It's not the same communication. I would love to think that they would be fine with that, but I really don't believe that that's a way to gain the public's trust in our decision-making. And I think we would be also, it would be presumptuous to say that we know how to make all those decisions ourselves. Because that's what it sounds like, especially if we're limiting comment. So again, I think this to me would be a bigger deal to avoid it than to just allow it. Otherwise, I don't know why we would just like piecemeal this portion of an agenda. We know most of the time that when we have these positions that they're voted on, they're later on. These meetings are long. People come in, you know, they've gone home, their kids are home, they've had dinner, you know, another parent comes, or they have a babysitter, or whatever have you. They want to come to the meeting. By the time they get here, they don't get to have their say. They may want to be able to sit there. And the more we limit that, I think we're going to feel that pain.
Okay. Was Ed first or you?
Ed was, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed.
Several things that were said that I think are very, very valid points. I don't think anybody's interested in limiting people's voices. The question, what are we afraid of? I think that question needs to be answered. What are the negative parts to it? And when I'm done, Melissa, if you could speak to it, I'd appreciate it. We do have a process in place, a very thorough, rigorous process. And I think it's fair to ask then, do you not trust the process? And how much weight do you put on the process of people going out, recruiting, vetting, interviewing, doing background checks, and bringing a recommended candidate forward versus folks coming and expressing their, God-given right to express their opinions? On the one hand, there's a whole lot of work that went behind it. And if you want to say that I just don't trust that, so be it. Say it. I just don't trust the administration to bring me a good candidate. I'd rather hear from the floor. Say it. If that's the case, fine, and take it at that. But keep in mind, by the time somebody has been brought to this table, a tremendous amount of work has been done to look into their background, to look into their work history, and it hasn't been perfect. I can tell you that there have been a number of times when that whole process fell flat on its face. But there is a process, and there is evidence that they can call back to. Now, if I come in and I say, I don't want you to hire Andrew because I don't think he's a very good guy, what do I have to offer you besides that for you to take it seriously? Or is that enough for you to take it seriously and you vote no on it? If that's the case, say it as well. But I keep coming back to the fact that we have tried through revising our hiring process and looking at how we put together interview panels. And of course, you can't guarantee that 100% of the people are going to be able to participate no matter what. I don't care if the meeting's at 5:30, 6:30, 7:30. There are always going to be people whose personal circumstances keep them from attending. Now, unless you want to make everything put everything out on a 24-hour vote, I don't know how you're going to be able to say that you can reach everybody. I think we've got to come to a conclusion here. Either you trust the process, and we trust that we have given people an opportunity, or just frankly say, no, I don't trust the process, and
it's
move
not
forward.
an either or choice. It's not an either or. I'm
Wait.
sorry, I just want to respond because I think that's a really important question, but it's not an either or. You can trust the process. I trust all of the people in this room. You are all on my team. We have to. If we don't have trust, then what are we doing? But we also have to give the opportunity for people to come in. And again, I'm going to say this again. I still don't see any strong evidence that says we should have spent all of this time doing this, talking about this, when we've made an issue out of we've made a massive issue out of something that was a very minor issue, in my opinion.
And I agree with you
I-
on that
I
point.
mean, we have
I
spent
agree
so
with you on
much
that,
time.
but we spent a lot more
I
time
agree
on
with
this
that
issue.
point, but
Okay.
there actually is video evidence to where people, right before we were voting to hire
True.
someone, people from the community made false statements
Right.
about that person's reputation and her performance.
Right.
We owe it to our hirees to have a certain element of decorum
Yeah.
and give people the opportunity to be hired in a decent, mannerly fashion. And by allowing people the open forum opportunity and the rigorous hiring process, all I'm asking is right before we're going to vote whether or not to hire someone, we don't let people from the community lambast them. And unless Ed was able to find out the actual correct numbers, this is,
But they're still gonna be able to lambast them if they want
Right.
before, when they get here.
but it's not them.
I understand.
Right,
Look, I'm not saying we open,
Right.
I don't, but.
So the
but-
amendment only
yeah.
speaks to right before we vote to hire
And to
someone.
me, it's an erosion of, we have something in place, and I still don't see any reason why, one, we should have spent so much time on it. I totally agree with you, Katie.
I still
Just-
had a question
Okay.
that was out there where I asked legal counsel to weigh in on.
Okay, sorry. Rhonda.
This was, the answer to the question was in my September 10th memo that I had sent to the board that you had reviewed. So the potential implications, as that memo described, include discriminatory concerns regarding potential comments, tortious interference with contract, as well as defamation considerations. And then, as you have noted, with respect to public comments, there are First Amendment considerations. This would not be viewpoint discrimination because you're taking the entire subject off the table, so you're not discriminating based on whether someone is for or against the candidate. You're just not allowing comments before you vote on that particular issue. You're allowing the comments during the regular public forum, just not at that particular moment of your meeting. And it is your meeting. You can decide when to allow public comments on a topic as long as you are not discriminating based on the speaker's viewpoint.
I think we have to be careful about saying we're allowing anyone from the public to do anything with their public school district. It's important to remember, and I've probably said this 5 times since I've been on the board, we are not a private company, we are a public entity. We have tax dollars that fund what we do. We are essentially allowing the public, I really hope we can actually remove that statement in the first place. I don't know if anyone in this room realizes this, but I believe we're in an uphill race with the public in the first place. The last thing we want to do right now is limit anything. I think we can handle what's going on. I would like to think that someone who's going to work at a building with a lot of challenges could actually, if possibly there's someone that comes in, and let's remember all of the times we voted on administrators in the last year, this isn't a pattern. It's not happening all the time. Yes, it did at one point, but A, this person is employed at the district. B, again, I'd like to think that someone who has that job could actually handle a couple comments that this person knows aren't true. I think if you're in public education, you realize that you have to be open to hearing from the public, and by closing the door because we're afraid of what might be said, no matter how we color it and blur that line, we're still telling them, if you make it by 5:30, we'll hear from you. But if you don't, you're out of luck. And no, 100% of people can't be part of those interview processes. But the bottom line is, the person who has, maybe they have something good to say. Maybe it's not just negativity. But the bottom line is, their taxes pay your paychecks, and they should be allowed to have a seat at that table. We should be expanding, if not anything, than limiting. I've heard the word allow, I've heard the word limit. I don't know how you think that's going to gain us any positive traction in the public relations department.
Can I just,
Michelle.
Can I just respond to that? Except the only concern, Rhonda, is you are correct that obviously all of the public employees' paychecks are paid by taxpayers, except that's not a defense for defamation or tortious interference of contract.
Okay, but
So that's the concern.
we went through that for 2 hours, and we realized someone obviously has to, yes, they have to show that something isn't true, and they actually have to take it upon themselves to go into a lawsuit with the community. But again, we're asking for people to come into our buildings that are a very challenging situation right now. And if we're hiring people that because one person said something untrue about them is going to turn around, grab a lawyer, get out there and file a lawsuit, then we have bigger problems than we realize.
Michelle?
I would like to go back to your comment, Brenda, and make sure that we have in our process clear messaging to our public that tells them this position is open, we are looking to get your feedback, that we want, our Board of Education and administration would like to hear from you, because my concern goes right back to if information that should be attended to is not heard at a time where we can really do something that makes sense with the information, I'm very concerned that we might be given information at the last minute and not have all the information to the board. Our priority, our responsibility as management is to make sure that we vet that candidate out the very best that we can, that we make sure that we have an inclusive body of staff and students and parents and community that have a voice in that process for these critical and important hires. And that at the end of the day, the candidate that we bring forward for recommendation is just that candidate that's been through that process. In the meantime, though, and we haven't done as well, Christina, as you noted, the time for reflection, and my goodness, we've reflected a fair amount in these last year, and justifiably so, and should have. The reality is, as we work collaboratively with our community out there, we really want to make sure that we have open and inclusive processes. And that was the intent of revamping the process that we have, and also making really sure that we have all voices that want to be heard, and that the Board of Education has every voice that wants to be heard as well. It matters to us very much that we have the very best leaders in our schools and leading our schools, so I just.
And can I just add to that, Michelle, and your, sorry.
Wait, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you, Michelle. I think what you said mitigates towards Rhonda and Andrew and Christina's position. There are undoubtedly bits of information out there on any given individual that people might have that can help us make the decision. The amendment that I had offered months ago addressed personnel items. I was thinking broader scale than just simply hiring. Concern about the kinds of things that we only do in closed session because as we read through that whole thing. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into the works. And I know this was addressed, but can we somehow engineer an opportunity, should somebody want to address something at that point, to go into closed session to hear them out and then come back out of closed session? The opportunity would be there. However, if anything is being said that is of a protected nature, it stays protected. The opportunity for people to express themselves is untarnished. The only thing different is that it's behind closed doors, so that concerns about defamation would be shielded.
Yeah, it can be posted that way.
Well, then, what we would have, in my view, if we did that, it would allow for us to continue the process that we put into place in the past that said, we want your input on all things we vote for. However, if it comes to a personnel issue, and I'll leave it at personnel, not just hiring, that we will accept a request to address the board But if it has to do with personnel, whether it's hiring or anything else, we'll go into closed session, executive session, whatever you call it, and come back out. But to hear a person, to hear them out in that type of a format.
That's,
Yep.
can be posted that way?
It can be, you just have to post that you're going into closed session and you would reconvene back into open session.
But we,
I do know that at the city, that they go into closed session all the
They're
time.
in and
come
out,
back
yeah.
but I mean, you would not know if you're going into closed session.
It will say that you may convene
You
into
may.
closed session.
Oh, so that would be
You have
just
the
an
option.
overarching,
Well, it would be on that agenda item.
oh, okay. Okay, that the board may, okay.
And I think of and again, I'm thinking of I'm not gonna name names quite obviously, but I'm thinking of a very specific administrative hire that was made in recent history where people had information, had they been able to bring it perhaps to that final board meeting and had an opportunity to speak to it, we might have dodged a bullet. So, it can be valuable. At the same time, we have a process, we want to respect the process. So that'd be my suggestion. We keep it as it was, where people have the opportunity, but if it's going to be on a personnel matter that we vote on, we vote to go into closed session to hear it out.
So, we really wouldn't have to take a vote tonight to do that, because currently we're taking,
It's gonna be based on the agenda item, really.
it's gonna be based on, it will do what we're doing, currently, and then we'll just post. We don't have to take a vote on whether we post that the board might go into closed session, correct?
Just a different way of posting.
Okay. Rhonda?
I want to clarify though, so then the public can still weigh in if they want to prior to us voting on a position, but they would have to come into closed session with us,
We would have closed session right then.
with the person that wants to speak.
right.
Correct.
Assuming it meets the statutory requirement of a closed
Right,
session. But
right.
what I'm hearing is it would be because of the reputational interest, that it may have a negative impact on the reputational
Yeah.
interest if
Right.
aired in public,
Right.
correct?
I mean, we can take a vote if people want to take a vote, but there isn't a motion for this right now, so we'd have to have a motion.
I think the idea, Ed, is I appreciate the consideration. We still have the open forum at the beginning where people can come in and say whatever we want, whatever they want. So we either trust the public and we want them to participate in an open forum. I think your suggestion is interesting. But if what you're saying are all of those things are all legal concerns, aren't they still legal concerns at the open forum? Because they can come in and say the same thing then too, right?
The issue, I think the concern regarding the legal liability was that those views were being expressed at a point in time in the agenda when it's on the agenda and the public can then expect the interaction with the board, which is why you changed the way that your public participation was being noticed on your agenda, so that there could be that back and forth discussion with the board with respect to those particular items versus the public participation at the beginning of your meetings where there isn't that back and forth discussion because the items have not been noticed.
So I'm sorry, can I ask a clarifying question? The back and forth between the board and the person speaking, that is what heightens the concerns from a legal standpoint.
Correct, because you have now gotten through the whole hiring process. A conditional offer pending board approval has been made to the candidate, and now information is coming forward at that late hour. And as you have experienced, it's not, there could be untrue information, which in the particular case that has caused this to come to the board's attention, there was multiple speakers that brought forward untrue information. If the board would then decide to not award the contract based on that information that had come forward at that particular time, based on your back and forth interaction, there is a tortious interference of contract claim. There could be a discrimination claim, all the things that were outlined in that September 10th memo.
Right.
So Ed's offer of going into closed session would cause the pause and then and then allow for that information to be shared.
But in that open forum, we are able to open it up to have a dialogue if we so choose.
No. That's where you can ask clarifying questions.
We don't
Right.
have dialogue during
But
the
we
But you can
don't
ask, okay,
in
well, I
terms of
mean
that.
dialogue,
You
I
can
think
ask
we can ask
clarifying
clarifying questions. We've
But
had
then-
conversations with
but the-
people in that open
If it's
forum.
noticed on the agenda, you can.
You
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
You can, except that you have structured your public participation to have it during the agenda item, so that, it's at the time when other members of the public would be aware that that conversation is taking place versus at the beginning of the session.
It's
But if we
also
wanted
for-
to, we could do it that way.
Because it's noticed on the agenda?
Right.
Correct.
I have a question about the tortious interference with contracts. So in order for that to happen, we as a board, the majority would have to vote against the contract hiring the position. Right?
That could be one of the claims. There could be other interference with the contract. So it could be a delay in the contract. It could be where you may hire the person and they're unable to get a job in the future based on what has come out in that board meeting. There could be other potential negative ramifications from that information coming forward.
And these are
And
case
should that information
histories.
come out in closed session? I mean, the board isn't obligated to hire anybody regardless of what comes forward, so.
Correct.
But so I think it's important for people to know that, has this ever happened in the history of, has this ever happened in the last, how long have you been here? 16?
15 years.
15 years. Has it ever happened in the last 15 years?
Well, we haven't had public comment before candidate hiring,
Right.
so.
But I mean, so it's
So-
not
I
happened.
can tell you that it has happened within the last, sometime within the last 30 years. A colleague of mine was named, hired as superintendent of a school district not far from here, was offered a contract, it was all in the papers, and a group of individuals who had an axe to grind against him got in a car, took a road trip, and started buttonholing board members in this particular district. They withdrew their contract offer. There was a lawsuit that school district then lost because of it, because basically they acted on hearsay. Now,
How many board members?
pardon?
How many board members on that?
I think it's a board of 5, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I think, it's kind of we're casting a really wide net to think that we're actually going to create this problem. I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely, based on all of the logistics involved, that would happen.
We're going, back to Christina's point before about the amount of time we're taking. We want public involvement. I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't. We want the broadest possible public involvement. And I recognize that there are time constraints, and we would like to do whatever we can to alleviate that. We recognize that there are folks in the public that may have information that should be brought to bear. But at the same time, we don't want to put people in a position that causes them undue embarrassment, that might interfere with their future employment. But if there are things that we need to hear, we need to hear them. And if we were to hear them in closed session, we've given everybody in the public that opportunity, when it comes up to a vote, to do that. The only difference would be it's not on camera. They're protected, we're protected, the candidate is protected, but the information that we want, the ability to speak, the ability to participate, all those things are there. The only thing that's not there is that if I decide to come forward and read erroneous data saying that, I know that you, Rhonda, as a principal, had failing schools 6 years in a row, and that came out as something that was totally inaccurate, I haven't embarrassed myself in the public.
But isn't that the job for the chair to, she doesn't have a gavel, but to gavel that down or to handle that? I mean, that is the job of a chair. I mean, I've seen it in city and county meetings. That's the job of the chair, to take care of that moment, to, get in there and detour that, if it was to happen.
But then I run the risk of viewpoint discrimination if I get to that point.
We're already to some degree. I mean, we're kind of saying things and then
Viewpoint
taking it back.
discrimination is when someone is speaking and you don't like what they're saying and you make them you ask them to stop speaking. Viewpoint discrimination is not that we don't have public comment right before hires. That's not viewpoint discrimination. Viewpoint discrimination is as a person is talking, I decide that I don't like what they're saying, and I make them stop talking. So whether, you know, so then we're at risk of being of being, I don't know what the word is, accused of viewpoint
Well,
discrimination.
that's what we were going to, that's initially what was on the table to begin with, was that. Before
No.
Ed brought up the closed session, is that we don't want to have anybody speaking at that moment that we're going to vote. I mean, I'm probably done talking about this. I'm not interested in limiting anything at all. I think we're all, you know, big kids and we can handle what's going on. I think, again, I'd like to think that that's not, as in evidence, it's not a chronic problem that we're experiencing in the first place. Yeah.
Michelle?
Melissa, could you clarify, if this opportunity to go into closed session was part of it? First of all, the board would have to make a decision, or the chair would make a decision if somebody came forward. Would that not, to your point, Ed, wouldn't that afford someone who maybe has important information, it's bothering them, they want to come and share it, they don't want to be in front of a large group to talk about it, and to be able to speak to the entire board about their concern?
Sure, I think it would have the potential to
Open more doors, maybe,
open up more,
possibly?
more
Right.
opportunity.
So that's, I wondered if that was.
In my September memo where I listed 7 options, I know 3 were listed on Facebook, but I listed 7 options. And number 5 was provide for public comment, but where concerning statements are made during the course of public comment period, the board president could ask the speaker to meet with the board in closed session or suggest that a complaint be filed. The board president could also advise the speaker that their comments are afforded no legal protection and continue to make such statements may create legal liability for the speaker. The board would then offer a chance to address the board in closed session or file a complaint. So that was number 5 on the memo.
So I guess what's the board's preference, of taking a vote, or?
I will remove my amendment and then support Ed's closed session if you want to make it in the form of an amendment.
Then my understanding is the current amendment that is on the floor, if that is defeated, there are no changes, which means we continue as we had intended. I think it was in March or May, whenever we said that people would be an opportunity to, people would have that opportunity to speak to any agenda item. This board has already had the ability to go into closed session, and we understand that, you know, if a person comes forward with information that they want to share regarding personnel matters, you know, my hope would be that we would go into closed session. So.
But we would have to vote to go into closed session.
Mhm.
So it's not automatic that this person will be able to be heard, because we would have to actually be, we would have to approve.
No, they would be able to be heard. It would be up to the board to go into closed session.
But we have to take a vote to do that. Correct.
Mhm.
So maybe it doesn't pass.
If it doesn't pass, then they, you know.
But still, I'm just saying, that's still not a guarantee. There's still a step in the process that has to happen, and I have seen other governmental bodies who have that part of a process, but they're not able to actually use it because the majority didn't carry them into that closed session room.
But we've
So
already
the-
established, Rhonda, that people will be afforded an opportunity to speak to any agenda item we're voting on.
Okay, but we still have to take a vote on it. So we can't truly, with a straight face, guarantee you can be heard, because we still have to take a vote to go into a closed session.
But the onus is on us to call for the closed session.
Right, I know.
And if we don't call for the closed session, then they make the comments publicly.
Then it's made
So
public.
either way, they're heard.
As long as it's,
Either way, they're heard. We go into, vote to go into closed session at the moment that
If
the
you remember
person.
back when we were talking about
Yeah.
this in August or September, I said, I don't know why we're having this discussion. To me, that it was a ship that already sailed. We said that anything that comes up for a vote is subject to people speaking at open session. And then we started diving into the weeds, talking about individual hiring decisions, and then it got messy there. And had we stopped there, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Anything that's subject to a vote is subject to people speaking to. Now, all I'm suggesting is that we stay with that and understand that we could go into closed session to hear an individual's concerns or an individual's advice, an individual's questions about personnel matters that we would be voting on.
And I hear you, and I understand. I still believe that this is our meeting. We're in session. It's an open session. We're taking votes. And with every other agenda item, we have this opportunity. But we're taking this one away.
I'm not taking
No, we're
anything
not
away,
taking
because
it away.
We come out of closed session, and then you take your vote. We're not
We're-
taking anything away.
But we're assuming that everybody wants to go into a closed session with the board. I think we're making so many decisions for the public when their First Amendment right is to just be heard in a government open session meeting. I mean, I'm sure I'm not convincing anyone sitting here, so we can move on and proceed, but that's, again, more, people already talk about how much city and, school board government go into closed session. It's not a popular thing. So I don't believe that would be a good idea. I know what you're saying. This is just me speaking. Again, it's like we're trying to find a problem that's really not chronic. It's not there. We've been doing this, and I actually think it was January. It was a while ago we've been doing
When we
this.
first talked.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think we have bigger fish to fry, personally.
I was in a meeting last week and somebody said to me, no society can punish itself into safety. And I think that is an example of where we are right now. We have spent so much time on this with little evidence to show that any of these changes will really make a difference. We still have open forums, we still have all this stuff. We can't, I don't see why we've spent so much time on this. I understand the concerns of the board. We have evidence to show that we have bigger fish to fry and bigger issues that we should be spending our time on. I would like to just take a vote on this and move on so that we can get to other business, because I still don't see any other evidence that demonstrates to me that we should make a change.
Laura?
I hear you, Christina. But I was here the night that Cindy Olsen sat here and was publicly humiliated for no good reason. I don't ever want to see that again. And that's what will be driving my vote.
And I get to hear from parents all the time, as you do every day, about the other issues that we have that are critical in our district as well, that I think demand our attention and our time. And I think and I totally agree with you, I don't want anybody to come here and be humiliated, but I think we've spent a lot of time on this and we need to decide how we're gonna move forward, because we need to get to those other issues. So I totally agree with you.
So there's currently currently an amendment on the table.
That I offered to withdraw if we wanted to pursue the closed session piece.
Oh. So the motion,
Who made the amendment?
I made the amendment and Ed seconded it
tonight
No.
or last September?
last September. We're going back to last September's
Okay.
amendment.
So the amendment
Yeah.
is taking the public participation off of the keeping public participation prior to hires. Would be, sorry,
No.
I don't have it in front of me. The amendment is to withdraw public participation during
Personnel matters.
personnel matters. And you're withdrawing your amendment?
I'm withdrawing the amendment with the intention of supporting the going into closed session,
I would support that as well.
exercise as an option.
Same here.
So the motion now reads what I read, correct? That the board will permit public participation during agenda items that we're voting on as noted on the board's agenda. That's the motion right now. Do we, is there interest in adding an amendment to that regarding these closed sessions, or are we just gonna leave that?
That's a procedural thing that we have the option to do.
Well, we didn't have the option unless it was posted.
It's
but
posted,
So,
yeah.
so we'll, from moving forward with
Post it.
consensus of the
Then
board, we'll
post it
just post the
accordingly.
closed session option.
So long as
Under-
it's available as an option under the law.
Right, it has to be
Right.
under the law of closed session law, right, right. All right,
So read the motion again, please.
you wanna read it, Sandy's?
The whole thing?
Yeah,
Okay. So the motion is going to be, the board will provide our community with two different opportunities during
oh,
today.
it's this whole
It's
thing.
this whole thing.
Right.
Oh, okay,
It's this whole thing.
all
So in
right,
the
That's
end,
what
we're
the
just
original
voting on
motion was.
that.
Right.
Never did vote on
You're
it.
formally adopting the instructions that Brenda reads at the
Right.
beginning of the board
of the
meeting.
board meeting,
Right.
That we've been practicing since last year.
Now we
minus the
formalize it.
closed session option, which we're going to add to our meeting notice.
Right.
All right,
Yeah.
Do we
Everybody
need to
clear?
have a second to withdraw the motion, or don't you need that?
I'll
He
second-
agreed,
I'll
yeah.
second that if we need
He
it.
agreed, we,
He
yeah.
did.
I agreed to withdraw, and he agreed to withdraw.
I withdraw my second.
All right. You withdraw, I'll withdraw, we'll leave in a huff, and everything will be fine.
all right, Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Walk out there.
Sid?
Aye.
No, she, oh, there you go, sorry.
Wait, it wasn't me, it was her, right?
I know.
Okay.
Are you trying to take away our vote? No, go ahead. She said aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Dorf?
Aye.
Shelton? Aye. Warren?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Carried 7-0. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the
So
board
moved.
meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and we'll move on to our regular work session. And first, we have our public forum. Well, first, all 7 board members are present. We're joined at the table to my left by Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent, Sandy Heller, our board secretary. We have 2 intercity student council members here today, Jamie Barbian from West High School, who's our president, and Owen Brennan from Preble High School. And then the rest of the people around the board are members of the superintendent's cabinet. So we start with our public forum, and I have one person who's filled out a form who would like to speak, and I'll call up Barbara Dorf.
Well, Barb, our new format
Oh,
is you go to
oh,
the
podium.
podium. We're putting on airs. There you go. I know, I know.
Putting on hairs, is that what you just? Okay, you're so funny.
No.
You will be.
Okay, can you, oh,
There you go.
let's try it. How about here? Here?
Good.
Please do not start the timer until I ask if I could please have more than 5 minutes. I have information for this board. I have some history for this board that I feel is critical. I've spent 2 days putting it together, and it will take a little more than 5 minutes, no more than 15. May I please have that?
Do we have to
The
take?
chair needs to grant the exception.
Okay, and is the board okay with that?
Yes.
Everybody? Rhonda?
I'm always okay with giving everyone as much time as they want. I think we have to make sure that we grant this to anyone else who would like to do this as well in the future.
Well, I certainly know it's been done in the past.
It's been
because
done in the
I've been
past,
here,
yeah.
and it has been done.
It hasn't been done since I've been on the board. I just want to make sure.
Anyone who's asked has been granted
15
additional
minutes?
time.
They have?
Well, no one's been as specific, and she's used up
Okay.
2 of her
Right.
15 minutes.
No,
Now
I
she's at
haven't.
15.
It did
All
not
right,
We're
start.
not
all right,
starting
all
our
right.
time until I stop.
Just
I
kidding.
just want to make sure that that's
I'm here as Barbara Dorff, community member, taxpayer, parent, and grandparent.
I agree.
I am not here as Alderwoman Barbara Dorff or wife of Ed Dorff. So I'm a community member, and I heard how welcome community members are tonight to give input. So I feel fairly confident that asking for 15 minutes is not asking for too much.
And I absolutely I have no problem giving you 15 minutes. I just want to make sure that we do this if they know it's an option. I don't think everyone knows that. That's all I'm saying.
I would support it, I would say just about all the time. I think there's cases where I would stick to I could see cases where perhaps someone with no connection to the district wanted to give a sales presentation about a product or something. That gives us protection there. But if someone who's part of the community wants to speak, I think it'd be very rare that I wouldn't want to give an extension, and this is not a time to not give that extension. So
I agree.
go for it.
Go ahead,
All
Barb.
right.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Barb.
All right. My name is Barbara Dorff. I live at 3375 Pebble Beach Court, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I will welcome clarifying questions. I am an elected official myself. I understand the restraints you're under as far as discussion. However, I do know you may ask clarifying questions, and if you want to interrupt me at any moment, please feel free to do so. What I'm here about is giving a history that I've been involved in as far as expulsions, suspensions, detentions, and student behavior. And I need to start back 2003, 2004. That year I was the director of student services. Prior to that, I'd been an associate principal and a principal in this district, and I'd been dealt with lots of disciplinary issues, up to and including expulsions. I was very familiar with how this district ran. When I became director of student services, this became part of my job. In 2003-04 reporting year, schools were asked to submit suspension, expulsion, and district-wide expulsion data by June 30th of each year by DPI. That's the first year that happened. This change was required to meet the No Child Left Behind requirements for internal review for persistently dangerous schools. The department will notify schools that have exceeded the established criteria for 3 or more years within 30 days. If you've got too many expulsions, your school's going to be persistently dangerous, and anybody can choose to not go to your school. And at that time, we didn't have open enrollment. And it would be up to the district to pay for transportation and to move those children and to put them in any school that parent wanted if your school became persistently dangerous. 2005-06, the disproportionality task force was formed, which I led that task force. About 2007-08, not exactly sure when, but right in there, the number of expulsions in several Green Bay schools had those schools in danger of being labeled persistently dangerous schools, and we had to do something. Our expulsion rate was going out of control. Well, let's talk about chance for change now and manifestations. Students with special education needs must be offered services under IDEA. When a student with special needs committed an expellable offense, a manifestation hearing was held to determine, was the behavior a manifestation of that child's disability, or was the behavior the result of that child's individual educational plan not being followed? In the vast majority of cases, the IEP team that formed the manifestation team would determine that the expellable behaviors were neither a manifestation of the disability nor caused by any failure to meet the IEP. But nevertheless, as IDEA required that educational services be provided to students with disabilities, even if expelled, these students were provided an alternative placement in a program called Chance for Change in Green Bay. Regular ed students did not have that option at that time. There were many expulsions happening. 2 that I remember very clearly, because that was also part of my job, expulsions. A group of middle school students passed along some marijuana to each other. A young girl, this one really hurt, with a broken leg, who had some pain pills, gave her friend one of her pills because her friend had a really bad headache. And guess what? There was no tolerance. This was distributing. And these students in middle school were expelled, and several middle schools were in danger of becoming persistently dangerous schools in this district, and we needed to do something. I researched and I have all these old policies, and we'll get to this in a little while. If you were a regular ed student, you were expelled. If you were a special ed student, you got chance for change. The idea of a BANCE was born. Let's credit Jerry Wieland with that. And a regular ed chance for change was created. So what's in a BANCE? So if a student's accused of committing an expellable offense and was afforded due process, and the investigation determined that that student did indeed commit that behavior, we could provide an alternative to expulsion now. The expulsion would be held in abeyance. It would be suspended, as long as the student followed very strict and specific conditions, including a change of placement and requirements regarding attendance, behavior, counseling, and cooperation with services provided. And our number of expulsions plummeted, just like that. Not because expellable offenses were decreasing. No. Expellable offenses kept on. People still were fighting. Kids were fighting. Kids were bringing drugs to school. Kids brought weapons to school. But it wasn't demanded that it be brought to expulsion. We had a choice. We brought a lot of these to the abeyance process because we felt that unless it was totally egregious, that they could have another chance. So these students were allowed to be taught in an alternative setting until they earned their way back or were ready to be back into regular school. So during the following years, we looked at the disproportionality of suspension between ethnic groups, as well as between special education and regular education in the schools, because this was a grave concern. We studied the way we disciplined students and why detentions and suspensions were given. We reevaluated student behavior policies. These policies here, 3 times you're out. 1 time distributing, you're out. Wow. KDAN, KDAM, KDAJ, lots of you have never even heard that. Andrew knows what that is, and Brenda probably knows. But those policies are now the 400 policies. We reevaluated student behavior policies dealing with violence and aggression, weapons, drugs, and alcohol with the premise that one size does not fit all. And we revised those policies in 2008 and in 2012 when I was still employed. I left in 2015. And I noticed when I looked all those policies up again today and yesterday in 2017. Referral for expulsion was no longer prescribed after a certain number of policy violations within a 3-year time period. Used to be middle school, you did 1 in 6th grade, 1 in 7th, 1 in 8th, oh, you're out. You did 1 in 9th, 2 in 9th, 1 in 11th, you're out. Because we had that clumped together, middle school, high school, and you could be expelled even if there were extenuating circumstances. Well, that disappeared from our policies. We changed our policies. Informed discretion was allowed, and extenuating circumstances could be taken into consideration. We looked at in-school suspension, and we found there were better ways to deal with behaviors. Academic intervention rooms, behavior intervention rooms with teachers assigned, not just monitors, teachers. Homework was given instead of suspension in or out of school, and those were among some of the changes offered. I was responsible for associate principals. So having meaningful conversations between associate principals or principals and the students about their behaviors and making better choices was required of my associate principals, of our associate principals. And the numbers slowly began to trend downward, but not enough. And there was still that disproportionality. In further response, a behavior task force was formed. 2011, 2012, I don't have my stuff anymore, but that's about when it was. And a great deal of research was done and I was deeply involved in that, looking at schools across the nation that had been successful in increasing positive behaviors and decreasing consequences like suspension and expulsion. PBIS, positive behavior intervention and supports, got rolling in GBAPS. And even though I retired in 2015, I know all of these things are still in operation. And I really believe it's important that all the trustees on the school board know that these efforts have been ongoing for years. And then came the crisis at Washington Middle School. After learning of some terribly egregious behaviors and incidents that had happened to students and staff, events that the school board believed should have been brought to their attention in many cases, this school board said, we want to have more say in what happens when a student commits an expellable offense. I was here, I heard it. Yes, administrators, you have your abeyances, and not all students who commit expellable offenses come before the board. But now we want more of them too. I know in particular, and among a few other specific kinds of offenses, this board demanded to know if any time a staff member was assaulted by a student, they wanted this to come before the board. So the board asked for more expulsions. And now why am I here, other than to give you the history? Spent last week in the hospital with my husband, did a lot of reading, a lot of quiet time. Ed couldn't talk. So I was looking online and I was reading the paper and
Taking advantage, but.
Yep. And I know as an elected official that not everything one reads in the news is always entirely accurate. Okay, I get that. But I read that there was a board trustee, who I'm looking at, who wants to form, and I'm not attacking, okay, I'm just saying, I read this, wants to form or is forming a citizen committee because the number of expulsion hearings has increased, among other reasons. And then I saw on Facebook a board trustee or two kind of criticizing the district because the number of expulsion hearings has increased. And my understanding was that the school board told administration that they needed more discipline cases to come forward before the board. And now members of the board, and apparently lots of members of the public, from my reading, are wondering, why are there more expulsion hearings? So this wasn't really making sense to me. And I felt compelled to come forward to say that people are asking, but didn't the board want more expulsion hearings? And it made sense that you did. So I don't understand why there's that confusion out there as to why there are more, or criticism. I felt it was criticism. Could be wrong, that may not have been the intent, but as I read the comments on Facebook and in the newspaper, I felt it was a lot of criticism. This was my job when I was the executive director of pupil services in this district. This was my job. Expulsions was my job. And I couldn't imagine being faced with my bosses, my school board, telling me to do something and then getting criticized for doing what I was told to do. And I really felt I needed to say that. I have a great deal invested in this school district as an employee of this district for 17 years, as a parent of children that went to school here, as a grandparent of students currently in the district, as the mother of a child who teaches in the district. I care about Green Bay Area Public Schools. I fervently hope that by giving this partial history, it will help some members of this board to gain a deeper understanding of some of the work that has been done over the years to address disproportionality regarding consequences for behaviors, and that district staff has been working hard to do the right thing for all students for a very long time. I thank you for listening, and I welcome any questions.
Andrew,
Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm just wondering on the timing, Barb, because this is I don't know if this practice was starting when you were still in your position or if this is a little bit newer practice, but in cases where an expulsion, a true expulsion is ordered, however, the administration is directed to provide services. It's kind of, it's more than what abeyance was because expulsion is ordered. But even whether it's in a building or perhaps it's just online, was that practice, I just wanted to make sure that that was in the record too, that that does exist where for whatever reason, safety or whatnot, we might decide expulsion is right for the safety of all, but then there is still an educational offering and a person could still graduate. So
Definitely was going on while I was
we
there.
were starting that, okay.
Oh, yeah, that was going on while I was still employed.
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to remind everyone, this is not a posted agenda item, so it has to be pretty narrow questioning and not any discussion back and forth. Rhonda?
I don't have a question. I just want to clarify and make sure people understand that I was not on the board at the time that that was decided. I came on in November of last year, and a lot of this had happened prior to me being on the board.
I'd also like to just
Wait,
thank you for
wait, Ed, did
Oh,
you,
sorry,
did you raise your hand?
I didn't see you.
No.
No, okay, I thought you had your hand up. Christina?
I just wanted to thank you for your time and all of your work that you've done, Barb, with all of this. It was great to hear your history and everything you've done. I just want to make sure that everyone in this room knows that what I'm interested in is not criticizing any individual person, and I don't believe I've ever done that, and if anyone feels that I have, please let me know. What I'm interested in is systems level change. And looking at the systems that we have had in place going back a number of years and seeing how we can do what's best for kids. So I have a very positive approach to it and honoring the people that came before me and the work that's come before me and the people that are here now. So my approach is to have really constructive, courageous dialogue and to learn from the people that came before me, like you, and to move forward together.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Barb.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the board this evening? Seeing none, we will move to our agenda. And the first agenda item is a presentation from Achieve Brown County. Yes, no, you're at the table. Yeah, presenters sit at the table.
Before Adam Hardy begins to speak,
Wait, you're not on.
I know, I can tell. Still not on.
Something, there you go.
Here, I'm on.
Here, use that
Yeah,
one.
'cause so, thank you. As Adam, this is Adam Hardy, the leader for Achieve Brown County. One of the things that our community has really engaged in is addressing the needs of each and every child. And I think, Barbara, you did a nice segue into a lot of the work that we do to help kids get back on path and provide that hope and provide the dignity that each and every child deserves to be successful. Our community is very fortunate to be part of a community that cares deeply collectively about kids. And a lot of people may not even be aware of the Achieve Brown County effort. So we thought it was very important. The district has been very engaged in this effort collectively with our community, where the focus is on all kids, our future. So I welcome you, Adam. I know that obviously you know Brenda and many of the people in this room because we've been working on this for quite a while. So thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I have 15 minutes. I think these things work best when you break into kind of my monotone and ask questions. So I will try to run you through a quick PowerPoint. I do have handouts that you should have in front of you. My hope is that, I mean, the PowerPoint really references, except for one slide, the things in your packets. So if you can't see it on the screen, you should be able to look at them in your packets and get a better sense of what I'm talking about. So if you haven't heard of us, I do want to start at the beginning here briefly, if you haven't. Achieve Brown County is a collective impact effort in Brown County that started in 2014. And the idea is that we want to make sure that all kids have what they need to be successful in our community from birth into their careers. So that's a big mandate. Kind of our scope is age 0 to 26. And we do that really because the notion is that our community, and in our research we've seen this again and again. It's very, very resource rich. We have a lot here for our kids. And in fact, I would say very passion-rich. A lot of folks want to do what's right for our kids. We're often, though, system poor, which means that we have kids in our community that end up being more, our community is more lucky than good. So we have students who luck out and have highly engaged parents, and other kiddos who may have parents that want to be engaged but have to work 3 jobs. And we have some parents who didn't want to be parents, aren't very engaged at all. And we have students who luck out and find a mentor through an uncle or a neighbor or what have you, and some that don't at all. They just get missed. Despite all the best of intentions, despite all the passion, all the desire to make sure our kids are successful, we end up having some kids that are lucky and others that aren't. And our real goal here is to make sure that we're working, our job as a community is to make sure that we have a system in place so that these kids don't have to rely on luck, but we're there for them holistically. All of our services and supports are there, working together to our best advantage to make sure these kids are wrapped in these services so that the kids that have the most needs get the most supports every time. So that's the basic idea. Collective impact, if you want to look, is the idea of aligning these services and resources in our community across the board. So we're not limited to K-12 systems, but we're looking at healthcare, and we're looking at community-based organizations. We're looking at people in individual neighborhoods. Where the goal is to align all these resources to, again, make sure we're channeling those resources with the best impact for kids over and over again. So you're looking at individual action, which as we work together becomes coordinated action, which eventually is collaborative action, where everyone's aligned going the same direction.
Adam, I'm sorry, let me
Yeah.
ask you a clarifying question.
For sure.
I'm familiar with the collective impact model. Is this just the same type of model, just a different name, or is there differences here between the two?
No, this is founded, we actually started in 2014. We're built on the Strive model. So Strive started in 2006 in Cincinnati, and that's really where that was kind of the birthplace of collective impact.
Okay, so
So
same,
it is the same.
just a different
Yeah.
name. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the idea, how we do this to start with anyway, we use a lot of data, a lot of research. We build teams that cross systems. We have project managers and improvement methods, but the basic idea across our community is to make sure that we're all aligning around a common vision of success and then common goals across that continuum for kids. So making sure that we all agree that every child needs to be prepared for school. And every child needs to be successful in school, and we want kids to be on a pathway. So we don't decide for them what their path is, but if they're on a path, they should be able to see, envision their future, and if there are barriers that they encounter in that path, our job as a community is to get rid of those barriers for those kids, to make sure they're empowered to move on to the next step. So when they graduate from high school, they can go on, be a 2-year, 4-year, military, what have you, go on to the next step and be successful. So if they do choose post-secondary, our goal is to make sure they complete post-secondary. About half of our students in Brown County who enroll in post-secondary don't complete. And that's a big deal. It means that they had a vision, but they couldn't accomplish it. And they also have a debt burden now, most often. All of that is not good for our kids or young adults in our community. So our goal is to close that loop and eventually have all kids, if they enroll in post-secondary, they complete. Our fifth goal is really to make sure that we have young adults who are in the workforce who are successful. And for us, that's a baseline of 200% above the poverty line by age 26. It's a pretty low bar, actually. But our goal is to make sure that when kids are engaging in that trend, that pathway for them, that they're successful and they find a job and they're passionate and they're happy in the job. And then our sixth goal, you'll see there, really is when we started this work, the goal was to make sure we had a placeholder so that we don't forget all kids need to be engaged by their community and in engaging their community. So we have a kind of a pending outcome there that may eventually come off this dashboard and become a cross-cutting indicator, because really engagement of the kids and the kids in their community is something that's prevalent throughout the entire continuum, is relevant. So that's the basic idea behind what She Brown County is. I think if there aren't questions, we have a video that may or may not be queuable. What do you think, Lori? Okay, so I want to say this is, we've had in the past a video. It's about 4 years old. It was great, but we had a lot of characters in the video who have since moved on from this community. So we have created a new round of videos just to talk about what this is in a succinct way. It's very complex work. The videos help. This is hot off the presses, brand new, actually a draft. So I just want to share that, some of this stuff is, even the watermarks around the draft video is still there. So look past the draftness of it, hopefully, to the content that's inside of it, if you can.
My apologies, Adam, I've gotten a couple of versions of this as
Uh-oh.
Lori, it's gonna come from me, if that helps.
Was that one from you?
Yep, that one's from me.
And if for some reason that we can't get to run, it's not the end of the world. I think it's better to hear from other folks besides me, when it comes to this stuff. That's what the video does.
That's what I was, because I know I saved one more.
Any questions that come to mind while just giving her a chance to look around?
Oh, there. Oh, it's the PowerPoint.
I just had to say that. Right.
The right thing here? Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I can just keep on. It's not a must-have. It does help to see. We really lined up different diverse stakeholders that we've had involved in this stuff, and it helps to hear their take on all this. If you happen to find it, Lori, I can pause anytime.
Well, I think this is the only thing I have.
Okay. So, wasn't meant to be. That's all
Lori, I
right.
can send it to you right now. I found it.
So no questions at this point? Yeah.
Rhonda.
What data are you using to make sure that kids are wrapped in services? It says you use a lot of data.
Right. We have different kinds of data that we use at different times with the work we do. So I'll explain I have 2 case studies that I'll use to kind of explain how we go about aligning the community's resources around the kids. What we typically do is we'll use what you've probably seen before through WiseDash. So we have some outcomes level data, population data related to disaggregation around populations that don't graduate, that maybe need additional support within reading and literacy and numeracy. We have actually some fairly unique measures that we use for K readiness. So we're looking at literacy and numeracy, and then there's a social emotional attentional benchmark that we use as well. And then we also have some data, more high resolution data in a large data system that actually includes data from healthcare. It comes from that local programming like Big Brothers Big Sisters and Boys and Girls Club. And there is some other data from K-12 education in there. So there's a lot of different data types that I could go into if you want to hear about it, but that's...
No, are you getting data from our school district specifically?
Yeah, we are.
And just off WiseDash, or is there another?
So we have, right now we have WiseDash data. We have a DPI agreement that allows us to actually break the data down. So it's not what you'd see in the public access site, but you can actually kind of pair the data between different categories at higher resolution than you can within the current public site. And then we also have directory data within our larger data system at this point. I don't know if Michelle, you want to talk to that at all?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is on. We have a community information system through United Way in partnership with the Chief Brown County. And the focus of that over these years began many years ago when we started looking at early interventions and what we could do in terms of school readiness. And so one of the important parts of the data sets that we have in right now, we have all of our local hospital systems in when a child comes in at birth. And you're going to speak to that, I assume, in terms of the Early Childhood System of Care Initiative.
Yeah, I will.
And then the next piece then is So all of those students are coded, or children are coded, the babies. And then as they come through and go into maybe childcare systems, Encompass is in as well. So Aurora, Prevea, Bellin are in, Encompass is in. I don't know if there are other sprints of other systems that are in terms of childcare. And then the public school systems. Gwen has worked very hard with the team. Diane Dersch has been involved over all these years. Vicki Beyer, myself, Melissa has done MOUs to share the data, because the goal ultimately is to follow that child and make sure that those resources are there. There are data teams and work teams through Achieve Brown County who work very collaboratively. Terry Williams been involved, I'm looking around, Stephen Miller. So we've put a lot of resource in, and then Brenda for many years was the champion for Outcome 2. So, and Mary McCabe sits on the early childhood team. So we're really embracing and ensuring that we can work collectively to bring as many resources in as possible for the children we serve. It's been a large effort, not moving as quickly as some of us would like, but again, to do this well and right, just as many who have tried to share data before, not that easy.
Right.
Hardest part.
Not that easy
hardest part.
with FERPA and HIPAA and every PA there is, I think that, anyway, so.
Well, I think that the stewardship role that we all play over the data is really important. So it's okay that it's not that easy, but there is a high degree of value. So we have this longitudinal integrated data system that does allow us to see if kiddo A, we don't know who kiddo A is, but we know kiddos A get a support in early childhood. Our hope is that, and the value add of that program is that later on in life, those kids do better. And we can test that within this data. We can look at different programs and see if we're finding real wins in some of these programs, maybe see integration of programs even that's really impactful. So it allows us to watch this stuff over time. And the challenge, like Michelle said initially, was we had some great services that looked really good in years 0, 1, and 2, and then we had no idea if it was helpful later on in life. Just couldn't tell. And so was all that investment in early childhood paying off or not? And so the system was designed to really to test that, to show was there value in this work or not, and that's been expanded over time to include a larger cohort, essentially a larger group of kids.
So is it more that you're kind of a very large research machine? Would that be fair? Sort of. I think it'll be helpful once I describe kind of how we're doing stuff on the ground. There is the research component to it. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. And we have different data for different uses. So longitudinal data is good for looking at the systems change and informing policy. But we also have smaller data really to inform these collaborative teams. It's some process improvement data, essentially, which may never really be seen by Achieve Brown County staff proper, but the teams working together between systems. So it might be Green Bay Schools and Big Brothers Big Sisters and Boys and Girls Club and healthcare are working together and looking at some of this data. And so it's really a matter of what data is most effective to help move the needle for the kids, depending on the circumstances. And we're pretty entrepreneurial in that category. And we want to make sure that whatever we do is the most efficient way of making change that's positive for kids.
And do you have any findings for action right now? For us, for our district specifically?
In terms of the work that we're doing, has that had a long-term impact? I can say a lot of the data that we have isn't for public consumption. It's used for smaller teams. So what I can say is that we're in the middle of process improvements that have shown promising practice, but I can't show where an action has led to outcomes change at this point in time in the data, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know, I guess, how literally your organization, what you're doing.
Why don't we let him continue?
Yeah, let me do that. I think it'll make more sense if I can kind of provide the case studies. It might not, I don't know. Hopefully it will though, that's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
That's the point. Yeah, let's do the video.
The issue that we see is from a time you're born until you get your first job. On occasion, these kids can fall through the cracks because there's not a way to organize and follow them through their life cycle, and even more importantly, anticipate their needs as they go from one age stage and progress through their life.
Sometimes, staff will have 2,000 kids that they're trying to oversee. So to imagine them invest this significant amount of time into one child's life, it's unreasonable.
We have been in a community that is very, very rich with resources, and I would say even rich with passion to support kids.
In our community, one of the drawbacks that we've had is that all those resources, all those organizations in the past haven't really been connected to an overarching goal.
And it wasn't that they didn't want to share. The environment did exist for them to come to the table and talk about what they would bring to an effort and how they could contribute.
And that was the purpose of establishing Achieve Brown County.
When you look at Achieve Brown County, it really is a model for how different organizations and stakeholders in the community can come together and achieve something much, much bigger than they can individually. Achieve Brown County is now creating an environment in which all those organizations can come together and determine how can we share information and make a bigger impact in the community. We have so many different organizations that have really important data, healthcare, schools, nonprofits, and the ability to share all that data certainly allows us the opportunity to keep a single kid or a class of kids on track.
And the data system is the glue. Think about the ability to make interface entries when a provider interfaces with a child. Make an entry, build a history, build a ledger. It becomes the basis for assuring that support is both real and anticipated going forward for the kids that need them in the community.
When you back up and you look at the macro data, are there trends that we're seeing that are affected by the environment in which they exist? And once we identify those, can we deploy then additional resources to attack that particular issue? So you're trying to attend to it both on the macro level as well as down on the street level, what is happening with a child every single day.
We do a lot of on-the-ground work through a process, what we call an action team. So we'll bring in different important stakeholders in the community that really have access to these kids. We use data, we have project managers, and really we then have the team members, so people from the school systems and the programs and the healthcare, co-create a model or a process where they can, on the ground, in a school building, at a clinic, or wherever we're working, find the kids, and then intentionally have on tap support based on the individual needs of these students. So that we really do this together with these system partners to make sure that we can all work together to best serve the needs of the kids.
What I really am excited about is the fact that people are willing to and engaging in important conversations about how do we ensure that every child has what they need for success.
Years down the road, it'll be a point of children reaching their potential as 20-somethings. It'll be the point of current employees dealing less with social issues in their family because there's support there that's readily available. It'll be a point, I think, from a business standpoint, to be able to recruit high talent, top talent from around the U.S., not just the region, but the U.S., recruit the talent into Green Bay because of these sorts of systems and the way the community demonstrates its ability to work together.
Just to make sure that we're using the same tools and speaking the same language. I look forward to our partnership because now that we're using the same tools, our communication should be more effective between community partners. We should be able to look at children that are in the Birth to 3 program, catch them earlier to ensure that their needs are being met.
The value that Achieve Brown County brings to our community is creating a common community agenda.
We have so many people that are so committed and are looking for a way to plug in and use their gifts and talents to make things happen. And this is an opportunity where they can just find that avenue or that venue to really transform.
The work of raising our kids is the entire community's work. And as we continue to build these systems, as we continue to see results for the individual students as a result of the work we're all doing collectively together, we're going to see this collective ownership grow, and we're going to continue to see better results overall for our community so we can develop into something better.
way more exciting than hearing me talk, right? I'm worried about time. I do have 2 case studies. I don't know how much time I have to go over those. I can make it quick. I wouldn't mind at least having an opportunity to talk about one if we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good. So we have 2 infographics. You can find those in your folders. Each one aligns to our first outcome and our second outcome. So this is getting kids ready for school and then successfully completing their K-12 education. For outcome 1, we have a team. It's been really up and running for about a year and a half. It includes all 3 healthcare systems and then the county program called Birth to 3. And the idea, we looked at data and we found a few things we wanted to focus on to help make sure kids were getting access to systems and supports in early childhood. And one, we found that in healthcare, the bulk of kids, in terms of getting access to kids, are seen in healthcare. So we found about 80% of kids, a little bit more than that, get access to healthcare. And that's a good thing. That means we have a place where we can look for early delays, other risk factors, and then provide supports to them. The challenge was we saw a lot of variation in how this is being rolled out within actual individual clinics. So we had some clinics doing a great job of finding, individual risk factors and needs and referring them and getting that kind of closing that loop and getting support so that kids by age 5 were, as good as they're going to get to enter school. And then other clinics where there wasn't a lot of that happening. And it was just, so we worked with really senior leadership, kind of the grass tops with healthcare, to get down to a plan that would help us to roll out kind of a world-class detection system across all of our clinics. We get the buy-in from all 3 healthcare CEOs to do this. And you can see on the infographic, in 2016 we had no clinics really deploying this system. 2017 we had 4. 2018 we're actually going to exceed 12. That was our goal. And by the end of 2019, all of our clinics will be using this system to find our kids as early as possible. And that's been really good. But another issue popped up in the data that we had seen before. Even those clinics that were referring kids to get supports, more than half of their parents were typically refusing service or not showing up or otherwise not qualifying for services. So more than half of these kids with known risk factors were getting no support. So this is where we're resource rich, right? We have clinics everywhere. We have a system of support already kind of embedded in place, but no one is really on it. No one's looking and tracking these kids and seeing the fact that even though there's referrals being made, the kids weren't getting what they needed. And so what happens in that situation, what was happening and still happens, is they pop up on the radar later, really within your system. So you get these kids in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade who pop up, who should have been caught earlier but weren't. And so our goal in this space is to refine this system. So not only are we detecting any kid we can find, we're also making sure that when that child's referred to get a support, that something's there for them, that their parents, if they refuse service, we can close that loop with them. Someone can call them and say, hey, we know that you refuse this service. We know your child has a need. Let's figure out what to do about that. Let's get that kiddo some support. So that's the work of this team. Right now, as you see, we've got some great progress, great buy-in. This is all being done by the partners. So in terms of Achieve Brown County's role, we bring data, we bring the project managers, we create kind of an accountability to the community with all that. By the end of the day, all this work has been done by the individual healthcare systems and the county program called Birth to 3. And that's part of the value of this is together we're stronger. There is no additional program we're creating. We're leveraging existing resources to make sure we're maximizing its use. And often all that takes is just identifying a gap and then pointing that out to the folks that really want to do a great job but didn't know it existed. So that's what's happening in early childhood. Do I have time for the K-12?
Sure, go ahead.
So again, very quickly, this is really just in the beginning stages, so we call this an alpha test. So you'd ask the question, what can we see in the data? A lot of the data is very small data because we're working with small populations to really test this systems change, to look at improvement. So the goal right now, we've looked at something called the Dropout Early Warning System and the data in that. And that's really looking, it's an algorithm that looks at predictively risk factors for students dropping out. So you're looking at 4 basic measures, which aren't going to be new to any of you. You're looking at attendance, behavior, academics, and then mobility, which is that kind of proxy measure for home stability. And that algorithm basically gives us kind of a baseline of kids we know we need to support. And then for this test, within 4 individual school buildings, and you can see them there, it's Bayport, Preble, Edison, and Denmark. We've got a 3-step process. So we're looking at detecting these kids that have needs. So we all agree on what those students are, and we're driving resources to those kids that need it the most. Within these school buildings, we have a determine process and looking at kind of a tiered model for providing supports that match the individual's needs. And then for this first step of the alpha test, we're bringing in mentoring supports. Kind of tier 2 is Big Brothers Big Sisters. So we're looking at, these are kids that really have needs. Maybe again, their parent is working multiple jobs, isn't always present. They need someone in their corner, someone to help them, to bounce ideas off of, to compel them to fill out their FAFSA, whatever that is. It's just someone that's there for them day in, day out, to help support their meeting their goals. And then the tier 3 is really Boys and Girls Club. You're looking at a full-time professional mentor who's embedded within a school building, so that again, day in, day out, if this individual student has a need, they can go and talk with this mentor, and that person's there for them. So that's the basic idea. We're really just, right now, we're looking at more process wins. So, are these things happening that we want to have happen? Are you getting mentors in the pipeline? And one of our big next steps actually is we have a real shortage of mentors for the volunteer side, for the Big Brothers Big Sisters. So you'll be seeing here fairly soon a campaign we think we've got an untapped resource for folks in our community who really do want to help but don't know where to go. And so we now have defined kids with defined needs, a step-by-step process, so real people who know these kids can say, yeah, we think a mentor is a good fit for these kids. And then we're going to design a system where for those who are part of a faith-based organization, who are in the workforce, who want to do something different to volunteer, they can channel their energy and time into supporting these kids. And then when we see these larger outcomes rise up, we can all kind of collectively celebrate. So that's the basic idea behind that model. But again, it really is in the beginning stages of testing the model, and we'll grow that over time. Mentoring will be one of many different resources we provide for these students within this system. AODA, behavioral health, other things of that nature will come down the pike as this evolves. So those are 2 kind of examples of how we do what we do. Again, we bring in these system partners, so it's healthcare systems working with county systems. It's K-12 systems working with, community-based organizations, trying to integrate these things to better support kids.
Ask you a question, Adam. So for each of these outcomes, do you have a list of mutually reinforcing activities, best practices that your partners have agreed on to try to move this needle, or are they looking at the data individually and then looking at their system and making those decisions independently? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, actually. So we kind of standardize but customize a lot of this work. So what you end up having to do, again, it's kind of common vision, common goals, common measurement, and the measurement is really where it gets a little bit tricky, because different systems have different existing measurement requirements and whatnot. But the first step of this work really is kind of agreeing together to these basics. So are we in agreement that our goal is to ensure that kids who are at risk of dropping out get supports? And if the answer is yes, then we design really what we call a charter. So it's kind of a clear way of delineating, yeah, we all agree these are things we want to do together. This is how we're going to measure success. And then this is what our role is within that context. So everything's written down and very clear for everybody. But sometimes you do see, an individual, in this case, a school building, might have a specific way of doing something that is the best way for them, and a different building might have a different way. Same results, ultimately, but maybe different format. We allow that. So there is some degree of independence within this system. But again, it's the common goals and common measurement that keep everything lined up.
Can I ask you one other question?
Yeah.
Thank you for all this. How do you integrate health equity into this, right? Because as you know, when you do this work without that being a primary lens, it grows the inequities, right? Certain people get more and other people don't get what they need. So when you think about, race, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, disability, how are those health equity pieces driving what you do?
Well, equity in general is a really important part of collective impact work. And so for us, there's a variety of ways that people have approached, building equity to their community models. For us, there are still a variety of ways for us, but the primary method is, I kind of described it before, you've got, we call it the 3 Ds. So you're looking at across all of our systems, across the entire continuum of development. We want to make sure our systems are detecting need as early as we can, determining what the root cause is of that need for the individual kiddo or young adult, and then delivering a support that's right, that's going to be a good fit, to basically put them onto a track of success. So our thinking there is you're driving for those that have the most need. They get the most resources, the most relevant resources for those needs. And that's what equity is. Equity is that for the greatest needs, the greatest support. And for those who have less needs, obviously they need less of that integrated support to make sure that they trend well, in life. So that's the basic idea behind how we deliver equity within our system.
So that's part of your decision making on what you're doing in terms of the mutually the reinforcing activities.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just make a comment.
Okay.
I think one of the things that isn't apparent in this presentation is that the council or the team that looks through, and it's about 25 people. Luis Franco from the district serves on it with me, and there's a much broader group of people. It's not just the people on the video that have a voice. And one of the things I think of, we had a meeting last week about the mentoring program and how to make sure that parents become aware and what this means, and really vetting that out more deeply to make sure that we aren't creating more barriers, but rather more inclusive approaches, so strategies. So the people at the table, around the table, are intended to really inform that work and make sure that we have lenses on equity and parity as well, to make sure we're delivering the very best that we can. And then there are teams within the teams too.
Yeah.
So.
One of the most exciting things for me, when you see, you look at healthcare and early childhood, you have 3 systems sitting together that are fiercely competitive. But for this effort, they share transparently. So you got folks really sharing proprietary secrets, essentially, about how they do what they do with their data systems back and forth between systems. And they're happy to do it. And they talk about how they're watching these clinics ramp up and get better at supporting these kids, and they're just excited about it. They're individually excited to see this change happen, and that kind of passion for doing this work is what excites me and kind of keeps me moving on. I mean, this is our community coming together and kind of laying down your arms, and singularly focusing on how can we best support these kids. We'll compete another day, but today we're going to work together to support the kids. It's exciting. It's fun to watch.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Adam, thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Next, community partnerships.
As Kim Shannick and Amy Fish come to the table, I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that it was just a short number of years ago when we were afforded the opportunity to really do very intentional work in bringing our community partners to the table and making sure they're included in voice. I don't even know what year that was. It was just a couple of years ago that we created these positions so that we made sure that our community was a critical part of our success in doing that. So I want to welcome you and thank you for coming tonight as well.
Thank you, Dr. Langenfeld. I'd like to introduce Kim Shannock, our Coordinator of Community Partnerships and Grants to my far left, and Amy Fish, Volunteer and Community Partner Coordinator for the district. We've asked them to come and present to the board and to the public an update on our partnerships and work with the community.
Thank you, Vicki. I feel like what has come before us tonight was really a good springboard for what we're going to say. In particular, Dr. Langenfeld, your comment about this community really cares about helping kids. So most of our work is really, really, really fun and rewarding on a daily basis. So I'd just like to start out by saying that prior to coming into this position, I was a social worker in this school district, primarily in Central City schools, and my life has been immeasurably enriched by the opportunities that have been provided to me in this school district, and I'm deeply grateful for them. Amy came on board with me in March and has done some impressive work since that time, and I'm very grateful for her. Are you moving? Okay. Do we have the clicker? Okay. Oh boy. There we go. We have a partnership philosophy statement. By the way, we're nervous. We're both nervous. We practiced and we wrote notes. But
take
you know,
a deep breath.
hey.
We're fine. You're going to be fine.
This statement is intended to inform our work. It is both a reflection of a present state of our work, the work we do with community partners and our schools, and most importantly, our children and families. But we also hope that incorporated into it is a vision statement for us that drives our work forward with better and more innovative things for our families. There we go. These are the general partnership categories we're going to discuss with you this evening, and there will be a slide for each of them. We wanted to first frame up for you who we view as our partners. Our first and most important partners are our students, who we put at the front of all the work that we do every day, closely followed by the families in our district, along with the larger community, our schools, the wonderful staff within our schools, our district departments, and then our external individuals, groups, and organizations who are very happy to partner and work with us, along with funding partners for many of the things we'll talk with you about this evening. There we go. In health services, this is a very interesting aspect of the work we do because, as has been presented earlier this evening, HIPAA and FERPA are present in all of these partnerships, so it makes for interesting guardrails on everything we do. Just some of the large examples of what we're doing. We work a lot with the Brown County Health Department to ensure access and equity to our children and the larger community. One example is the immunization clinics we hold in our middle schools, and that parents can elect to. They have to sign permission for their child to participate. But in this example, we are up to compliance rates. I think Washington Middle School was at 99%. So we think this was a really good example of what is possible when you work together. A second one that's not up there is we will host their community-wide immunization clinics. So, for example, this fall in West High School we had one, and in East High School we had one. And the health department's really delighted by the amount of space we have and our families' comfort and familiarity with coming in our buildings. Secondly, you may or may not know the Oral Health Partnership exists in our community. It is a model program in the state that is right here in Green Bay. And it is intended to bring high-quality dental services to children who are on Badger Care or who are low-income uninsured. You can see up there that last school year, over 6,600 of our kids were served through this program. And what we really like about this program is that it reduces the amount of time kids are out of school for appointments, and it eliminates barriers such as transportation to their appointments. Moving on to the Rotary Club Vision Partnership. The Brown County Health Department does our vision and hearing screenings, and in conversations with them and district staff such as social workers and nurses, we're aware that there is a gap between when a child fails a screening and them actually making it to an optometrist appointment for an actual exam and glasses. In particular, our students who are low-income uninsured or on Badger Care, because once you're familiar with the Badger Care system, you would understand there's a lot of intricacies in it that are fairly discouraging. So we expect to have pretty good news for you on what we're doing with this. The health department's a very invested partner.
Excuse me, before you go on, with the Vision Partnership, Kim, how is it operated these days? I mean, time was there were trailers that would go around. Is that still in operation that way, or how are we?
The Lions Club
utilizing it?
occasionally does things like that. Our county elects to fund the vision and hearing screenings in our schools, so we're very fortunate in that respect. But really what the nurses who come in do is they just do the screening. And just this year, I was just in a meeting with them last week, they just updated to the Prevent Blindness most current guidelines on how to do them. And then we are building a connection between those screening results and our nurses and our social workers to really facilitate getting families to that full step.
Yeah, and it's that next step. I mean, not the screenings. I understand that can be done
Oh,
in school,
sorry.
but I'm talking about the full exams. And
Yep.
even to the point of prescribing
Mhm.
classes, and that's happening where at individual clinics and such.
Yes, typically within clinics.
Okay, thanks.
In collaboration with the Teaching and Learning Department, staff in the schools, and community partners, we have been able to continue to offer field trip fairs for staff. We align opportunities that the partners might have with our district curriculum and connect community partners with the teaching and learning staff. I'm not sure how to do.
Lori,
If
can you click on
You
field
could
trip?
click, yep, we have
Thank you.
several of those coming up. But here you can see the field trip matrix. It is a well-attended and received event. And then going back, we often receive outreach from the community to offer activities in our school. And our role is to support both the community and the schools. And we do this by helping the organization identify an appropriate school. We can help facilitate communication between the school and the community partner, as well as any paperwork that would need to be completed. Many of our partnerships are reoccurring due to the high student participation and program success. Oh, honestly, I will get this. Academic mentoring is a big body of work. These partners listed here are formalized partnerships, and this means that they request data from the district. Because of this request, it is our role to create authorizations. We collaborate with the legal department to create MOUs. We facilitate and facility requests and student recruitment, which is typically based on the partner program guidelines. It's important that we keep an open line of communication with these partners as we securely transfer data to them. The data is an important piece for the partners to continue to receive funding. In addition to these partners listed, we also have a lot of non-formalized partnerships that we work with as well. And we are so thankful to our schools who are wonderful and appreciative hosts to our academic partners.
Thank you, Amy. This is an example of our work in the area of access. You might recall that I think that we're in our second school year of all Green Bay Area Public Schools students having access to the Metro Transit system every day, every hour that it's in operation. So we work with Jeremy in transportation and our communications departments and our schools as well as Metro Transit. It is our goal to have those numbers continually move up, and I have to tell you, we're very proud of the participation of our students in this benefit to them.
Is it me?
Okay. These are some very fun literacy extensions we do. We work quite a bit with our technology department, the LMSs, as well as there's community partners in each of these. The Brown County Library is a tremendous partner to the school district. what do you think, Lori? We linked just examples so you could see. You're invited. We'd love to see any of you anytime at any of these. But we are doing preschool story times in many of our elementary, and now it has expanded to some of our secondary schools. Really cool examples at West High. There's a one of the childhood education classes prepares and then puts on the preschool story over there with Claire, their LMS. Secondly, in our summer libraries, we have a number of schools, they're all listed there this past summer, who act as extensions of the Brown County Library and then work with their school's summer school hours, and all of our kids have access to the books and resources. Other community partners like the Wildlife Sanctuary, et cetera, come in and offer fun programming. But this keeps all of our kids involved and eligible for the Brown County Library's Super Summer Reader program. We also partner with the Parks Department to bring all their kids in through the Parks program in summer. New this year is a diverse perspective author series. This was funding that was acquired by the Brown County Library, and we have had this author series that has been really successful. And what we did is worked with each of these authors, who also comes into our schools during the day for presentations to kids prior to their community presentation that night. Literacy, the literacy extensions that is one of the ways our community can really get involved. People love to work with you on providing sets of board books and other materials for preschool children to check out, because that's not typically an asset in our libraries. So that's been a great way to bring in community partners.
We reach out to different volunteer organizations like the Volunteer Center and faith-based organizations that bring volunteers into our buildings for various programs or might provide drives to benefit our students. My role is to connect an interested school with a faith-based community in close proximity to create ongoing partnerships where the community meets the specific needs of the school. And the faith-based partnerships is kind of new and really grabbing hold in the district. It's pretty exciting.
And our last slide for you. This has been a new area for us that's been really fun and interesting through a grant that's unfortunately sunsetting with NWTC. They had GED and English learner classes in some of our schools this year. Literacy Green Bay is also a partner. Lori, would you want to click the link for the community enrichment classes? Another way we're reaching out to the community is classes that are offered by our teachers. These are very popular and well attended. We intend to offer that again. We invite you to come to those anytime that we do them. And then also new this year, Amy is working with the United Way on parent cafes. Our first school is Eisenhower, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And that is off to a good start.
Yes, it is.
That was our last slide. Do you have any questions for us?
Can you go into more detail about what a parent cafe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can. So the Parent Cafe is a model where it's not a parenting class, but it is a safe space for parents to come in and have meaningful conversations about the 5 protective factors, which are factors that keep families strong. So the model is that we invite parents in, they share a meal and do an icebreaker, and then we have tables laid out, and they do a rotations where they have conversations at 3 different tables. And they're very powerful.
These are in the evening?
So right now we have only done it at Eisenhower. It's a series. One series has 3 sessions in it. So we have 1 session left of our first series, and we do it at drop-off. So that's at 8 in the morning. Pardon?
I said if you're looking for additional parents, let me know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some people already.
Yeah, so right now it's offered at Eisenhower, but it seems to be a pretty powerful model. So we'll see where it goes, and maybe it will expand.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well done.
Actually, just this week, I had someone reach out and ask me if we have any parent courses or classes that have to do with automotive repair.
Well, funny you should ask that. We are working on that right now. We've had one meeting with the teachers at East. We would love to. I've been working with Vicki on, we would like to offer something that is more than a one-night workshop, but less than a full enrollment class that has a credential or credits attached to it. So we're working on that and hope to roll that out in the next few months.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Ms. Maloney, I would just like to make it public that I'm very proud of the work these two have done. They work tirelessly for this district and for our students, and I'm glad you were able to see some of their work tonight.
Michelle?
I think they have done an extraordinary job of not only bringing these resources, but it's much more vast than what I see. And I know that the amount of in-kind resources and grants that go with this are not calculated up there, but it's a tremendous amount of resource that's being brought in for our kids that we wouldn't have. Oral Health Partners is a great example, but I also think of the remodels of the 13 libraries right now with a $250,000 Packer grant, and those are just the tips of the iceberg. But most important, and the excitement that I see that you're doing, is really partnering with our community and our parents and our families. And I loved that you said our first and most important partner are our students and then our families. So thank you for that.
Well, and it's not enough that you're seeking and developing these partnerships. I've seen you on the ground signing people up for the vision screening at the open houses at the beginning of the school year, so I know you're right there with contact with the students and the parents.
I have just a real specific question on the Diverse Perspectives Author Series. One of those is going to be Wednesday. That author is going to be in one of our schools during that day? Is that?
Yes, I wish Vicki Santa Croce was here to answer that specifically. So
I believe
they're
that's
always
true,
in our
but
schools during the day.
I'd love to know the school and the time.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to attend if possible, but I mean, I don't.
Okay, thanks. I think it's Washington, and Diane's checking with Vicki. But I will get that to you.
If you could get that to all of us, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your work. Okay.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you, Dr.
All
Lewis.
right.
Take a break, a short one.
There's a request for a break, a short one.
I just need to move.
All right.
Pee.
Brenda?
Oh.
There's been a request for a
Do a
break.
short break, Brenda?
All right.
Granted?
Granted, all right.
Your section.
All right, I didn't know I could grant breaks. Sorry, Jeff, it'll be a very brief break. You got this close to being at the table.
I think your wife.
All right. Hello.
Good. We will resume the meeting.
I know, but it was.
Where's Andrew?
He's a comment.
All right.
I got that, I understand that feeling.
I want to welcome Jeff Dickert from CESA 7. As you recall, I don't even know, a couple months ago, Board Member Sitnikow had asked for an important discussion to be put on the agenda, focused in on start times for schools. And obviously, school start times and the studies and the research is very compelling. In our discussion, we talked about what that process would look like and who could lead that discussion. And if I recall accurately, it was Board Member Dorff who suggested that perhaps we have a further discussion with CESA 7 to provide us with a framework of what that could look like, knowing full well that there have been many communities that have had that discussion, some much more successful than others, but also the recognition that it takes time. and you want to do it well and include everyone in that important conversation. So I want to welcome Jeff Dickert from CISA 7 and turn it over to you. And I know that everyone should have a packet, and we would post this packet if it's not already on there on Neptune so the community could see if it by tomorrow or the next day. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and it's always a pleasure to come back under very nice circumstances. In some cases, it always hasn't been very nice circumstances, but in this case, it is. We have had some discussion following up with Dr. Langenfeld and about what would a study for school start times possibly look like. And of course, we would always be gracious and happy that you've thought about us, but also that we know we're not the only one in town. But what I wanted to do is lay this out so that you could see kind of what the recommendation might be and what it would look like over time, and that it's an issue that's very complex. If you just do a Google search on this, you will find districts after districts. You'll find states looking at this. You'll find Chicago moving to this and not doing all their homework and 6 months later changing back. You're going to see a lot of different things. So I think if we can learn from that and take a good look at a process that would involve everybody, and then taking a long look at it, bringing everything back to you, and then in the end, like always, it's up to you as the school board to make that decision. And nobody will make that for you, but they'll give you all the information that's possible. So the premise, as you look at the first sheet that you've been provided, is that the Green Bay Area Public Schools Board of Education and Administration have been, approached, looking at the emerging research on school start time aligning to the biological clocks of the students. So the premise there is a little longer, but you can read that yourself. But I know you're interested in looking at the latest research, the current status. The one thing that I think oftentimes people don't look at deep enough, and if any of them have fallen apart, it's all of the subsidiary issues that are out there. And let me tell you, there's a ton of them, and it's a little different for each area, okay? And the thoughts and, of course, the opinions of the constituents. And, of course, everybody from, this was the same time I started back in, when I was in school, and it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, all the way to, the newest research on children's sleep studies. So as you take a look at all that, you put that all together, you have limited funding and so that, but I talked about maybe having it be a no-cost initiatives, but I think we'll talk about maybe changing that to we would bring everything forward and let you wrestle with the costs and so on, and maybe not limit that. At first, originally, I was thinking about, limiting only to if you could do it at very little cost, but I think maybe it'd be better to bring everything forward. You decide that in the end. The board and administration will use the study to make informed decisions on the school start times of the district schools for the 21-22 school year. This is not going to be a short process, and whether you go with us or you do it some other way, I would just advise you don't make this a very quick process. Take your time, be very deliberate. The communication, you'll see in some cases if you Google, the communication has not been where it needs to be over time. Moved very quickly, probably the right thing to do, but too fast. And really just, I'm just telling you, if we're involved, we would recommend that any change wouldn't be until the 2021-22 school year. So the process, in our cases, we would conduct a study on behalf of the board and the administration, and we would be that neutral third party that would conduct all facets with neutrality. I have no dog in this fight. I have no reason to have it one way or the other. So I would be the neutral part, and so would most of the people working on this in my organization. The findings would be presented to the board and the administration, as well as all the information garnered during the process to provide transparency of the process and the findings. And I think that's very important. As the committees meet, there will be a process that we'll have a website where people can go for all the information. We'll have a place where all the studies and everything will be laid in. There's several good examples of how to do that. Madison area schools did a nice job on theirs, and it's a nice way to continuously have people follow the progress. We'll come back in and check in at meetings, but it's just a nice way people individually can check in and see how it's going all the way along the process. So what I'm going to do is just kind of take you over to timeline, which is the document 1. So you can see that we're proposing up in the timelines that, we would start, and of course this can move according to your desire, but if anything, you'd start in a month or two, and you would see that I've established a task force, and again, that's something you would establish, but I think you need to be as wide as you can, and yet it has to be something that I could work with and the CISA 7 group could work with. 100 would be a little too much. I think this would be a group that we could work with in committees. We have some dates set over on the right. I probably have to move a few already because since this I've been booked on a couple other things. But we would work through this all and get this so that everybody would know when the meetings are. And if you're going to be on that committee and you're really going to represent central office, or you're going to be a middle school parent, or you're going to be a daycare program, we need you at all these meetings. And if the month gets accomplished in the first meeting, some of the tasks that we're going to try to do, we wouldn't need a second meeting that month. But we would try to always schedule them so everybody has them on their calendars, and we would work from there. The meetings would be on Wednesday nights, which oftentimes is, if any case, the freest night for people as school districts and so on have no activities. So we would try to coincide those with that. So that would kind of be the layout. And you can see that the committee work would start, and we would start working through things. We'd have the website operational in July. Until then, we'd probably use Google Docs. And we'll use Google Docs, but then have an official website. But you can see that there would be a step-to-step process monthly as we move through this process all the way into June and July with summary documents, websites, and so on. We would do a district-wide survey as we would move into this. We'd have input sessions for those that'd be very interested in coming out and speaking. We'd run them probably very similar to the informational cafes that we've ran for you previously. We like that. We like to take all that information and synthesize it into themes and areas that we can work through. And then we would have the final summary work towards the end of that calendar year. And then in December, the presentation to the board. If you flip over to the next side, that's where your work would probably begin as a group. We would recommend then the board reviews the study over several months. We would work with you through that process. Then it would be up to you to consider all the options. That could take one meeting, could be very simple. Or I could say it could take several, meetings. So I kind of laid it in 2 months for that. Board makes a decision in May. The decision is communicated to all. And then really the work of the administration and the district begins in prepping for that start in the 2021, all the way through, you can see in communication campaigns, principals holding meetings, making sure chamber and all the businesses are on board, understanding what's going to happen. The hardest and the best thing, if you do make any changes, of course, is always the bus routes and so on, and then you'd be ready to start in the fall of 2021. Now this lays it out in a system that can be adjusted. It gives you some time in there to make some adjustments. One of the biggest adjustments really, I think, is if you go back to the first page of the timeline in 2019 here, is the research. And there's kind of a couple ways to go around the research. There's been enough research out there. If you look at Madison School's website, they really have a nice listing of the research. We can bring in Hanover Research, who we work with quite often, but that'll be about another $18,000 bill to really get research that's already been pretty well established and purchased, by the way, by other school districts. So we would work with the committee to try to get to something that we could say, we can accept this. Other people have paid for it. Other people have gotten that. If there's other things out there, we'll go get them and bring them in. But I think that would be where, if anything takes longer, that may be something that might, or if everybody can agree that we can move some things that other districts have done, because we're really talking about the basic research on student sleeping patterns and their age and some of that stuff. And some of that's pretty hard to not give recognition to. So I see that as something we would look in and work with the committee, and it would lay that all out. One of the last things, the last 2 pages, just to give you an idea of generally what a study like this and work like this would cost. And so as you see the document, then you can see that we have administrative overview and leadership costs. My time would be covered because of your membership, but behind the scenes there's secretaries, there's administrative assistants, there's all kinds of stuff. Plus Aaron Malcheski, which you're familiar with, does a lot of this work for us ourselves. He's one part of our organization. So you can see the time and so on. The survey management, we would run it all. The web page creation, we would do all that, eventually handing that over to the district to operate as it becomes your baby. Task force meetings, those would only be charged out if people showed up according to how many meals and so on we have and how many meetings we have, but that would be the largest bill you could possibly see. Input sessions means markers and other stuff. So you can see a total there. Because somebody had asked, what would it run about? It would run about $42,000 if we did everything. If you look at the second page, that's where we provide all the leadership and all those things, but you have somebody who can do the survey, all right? Maybe you got people technology-wise that can do that. I know you have people technology-wise can do the web page and control that. Task force meetings and so on, you can cater or bring some of your food service people in or whatever. There's all kinds of options where you can just pay for that. With input sessions and materials, we would again charge that amount. So you can see there's an opportunity there also to use your personnel to save some in that way if you want to be involved in that manner. The beauty of us is if we run the survey and so on, it's the third party running the survey. All right, there's no talk about anybody, fixing the survey, doing it. It's done for you, and then we take care of that. Same thing with the web page creation and keeping it up to date and those types of things, making sure everything's on there that is presented. That would be one of the advantages of using us versus using somebody else or your own inside crew. But that's up to you. That's really something you can decide and you can take a look at. So that kind of lays it out very quickly. It's a framework. It was a sketch to design what one would look like, because I know you had talked about it previously, and Ed, appreciate you thinking of us. But this kind of guides out what the study would be. Some cases, some would say, wow, that's a long time, but I'm telling you, this is one hot button that you don't want to do incorrectly. That's all I'm going to say on that one. Okay, so with that, take some questions.
Andrew.
Okay, so the idea of and this maybe is just a first draft, or maybe looked at what modeled after a committee that maybe was done somewhere else, but there is the idea of a committee like this about school start time that doesn't have at least 5 student representatives on it is a non-starter, and I would vote no on a proposal that didn't have that. And I realize that's a little deeper in the weeds than we're getting here. It's a draft, but I will vote no if a proposal doesn't have at least 5 student members. And I guess also too, typically, and I do like, I like your facilitation. I like CISA 7's facilitation. It's worked well when we've used it. I'm good with it. It worked well when we were talking about the school security things. On first blush, I think I would prefer though that we would be, if we're paying CISA to facilitate, is to facilitate the work, but I think I prefer citizen members electing a chair and vice chair like we've done before, unless I'm missing something about that. I mean, this.
Yeah. Let me just respond a little bit. I think any of this stuff that's on here is up to you folks to set. You'll set the committee. You'll decide if, what it was. I wanted to give you what I would say would be the starting of where you don't want to make sure you forget anybody. But if you want to have, you will have to decide. So what age level kids do you want? Which ones do you want to have more on? That's something you guys can decide amongst yourselves. The chair and so on is not, we don't have to be the chair. We can facilitate. But I do know that as you do that, we have no vested interest in it versus somebody else who does. And I think that may be, it just may work easier this way than if you have a community member that has to lead that. They can trash me over anything and whatever and so on and whatever, and I bring the results. I hate to see a community member have to take some at school. If you check a lot of the start time things, it has not always gone really well and pleasant for people involved on the committee. So to take the little bit of the heat off of a certain individual who would be blamed for leading start time, whatever, that's really the only reason we put that on it. But that would be your choice, and that's the only reason we did that.
And that, like I said, I don't have a solid opinion on that.
Yeah.
I'm leaning that way, but it's the minimum of 5 students is the part I consider essential. Again, the facilitation's been provided on multiple projects from CISA. I'm happy with. I would presume we would probably bid out something like this, probably. If we're soliciting.
That's up to you.
We easily could.
Yeah.
I think that the piece, you can go, I don't think we're required by law to bid it out at all.
We're not required by the policy.
Or the policy to
It's
bid it
well
out.
below the limit.
It's well below the limit, and in fact, this is 2 years, so we're talking 25,000 in 2 years, right?
Yes, that's
It's a
correct.
2-year endeavor, that would be the minimum, but then, and we could do some of the work, so about a $12,000.
If it's well below the limit, I guess it's not, I would just want to make sure that the right questions were answered if we were going to do that, and I guess I would like more discussion before we signed off on something about the elected chair and vice chair.
And if I could offer, when we did the facilities study, they did elect I'm looking at Lori, they did
Yes.
elect a chair and a vice chair.
Right.
So it wasn't
I
the,
think we sort of chose them for the they
okay, so for one, they were chosen, but they were chosen as part of community, it wasn't
Right.
a
But
facility.
then we still have an independent.
But we still had a facilitator.
We did.
So-
Right.
We
Yeah, I think
did.
we would still
We
have,
had
no
both.
question, I think
Yes.
we should have an independent facilitator.
That's accurate.
Semantics, okay. Anything else? Any other? Brenda?
So your plan is to bring this back at a point we would take a vote on it, or?
Because I'm not sure we needed a vote. I didn't think we needed a vote, but I wanted to make sure, because it was a request of the board, I thought it was very important that you hear the proposal, provide input, see if this meets your needs, and you can see that this would be, and so it's really more of a blessing to go forth and say, okay, here are the areas we have some questions, concerns about. If we can get through to those, then we're good, if that makes sense. So it's saying, okay, what else is needed, what's missing?
So you haven't made the decision about whether to go with the
I think
42,000 or 25,000 or something in between?
It's probably gonna be in between,
Yeah,
because
that's what
we've
I
had
would
great
guess, too.
discussions around meals, and right now, meals, we did snacks for the other ones, and we provided them, and good for CISA, they do amazingly delicious meals. Here's what I do, and they do. Here's what I do know, though, a couple of things as I think about this, and I've given this a lot of thought. One of the things that having someone who is local as a facilitator, and we've had others who come from Milwaukee and other places, it affords us that I think a quicker turnaround if we are a little more nimble in terms of being able to have a facilitator who knows our community and knows people. So that would be one thing, and that might be helpful. I don't know, but I'm thinking, especially as it relates to a variety of stakeholders in this community who know Jeff. So I put that out there. And then the other thing I think is that one of the things Jeff didn't share is that he has offered to host these at CISA 7, which is, at evening time, so it wouldn't interfere with any of the custodians or any of the work that's going on in schools. They wouldn't be looking for different places or even needing to find parking
I think it
downtown.
also lends to the concept of objectivity.
And yes, well said. Yeah, so I think there's some advantages in that regard as well. So at maximum, it would be 42. I don't anticipate that would be it, because I already know how much I have in my budget. So anyway, we'd have to do some of that work ourselves, but I think we could collectively figure that out.
Well, every year we talk about it, and it's usually one or two things that come up as far as reasons why we're not going to proceed. I think what Jeff has laid out here, trying to address all the eventualities in a systematic manner, makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of having CISA do it. Once again, they can be objective, but they have their finger on the pulse of what goes on locally. They understand the community, and timeline makes sense too. Obviously, it's a huge deal if it's going to happen. But one way or the other, within a couple of years, we should have it decided upon. So I'd sure like to see us go forward.
So were you saying we wouldn't, was the initial plan that we wouldn't vote on this? Or?
You don't need to vote on the expenditure.
When we discussed this some months ago, I think it was more of we talked about saying, let's do something about it, saying to the administration, move ahead, come up with a plan, let's address it, let's not just ignore it. There's just too much interest around it, too many compelling concerns that we can't just sit on it, so we have to do something about it. And suggestion again, let's look at a partner that we have available to us. Can CISA help us out with it? Made a lot of sense, and I think it's a good plan to move forward with.
Yeah, I do too. I just think I think it's too big of a deal to not vote on. I mean, I think I'm gonna vote yes on it unless there's not enough student members on it, and I think the issue of the citizen members being chairs deserves some discussion. It just seems to be a strangely important thing to just head nod and do, even though I think
You're right.
everyone wants to do the study.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Andrew.
Probably.
I think we should be voted upon.
Okay, yeah.
And I agree with all of that. The only thing I want us to think about is, and I brought it forward, I'm in support of looking into this, but sometimes to the community, a vote equates action. What we're doing is we're exploring it, and we're not necessarily saying yes to it. So as long as, if we were gonna vote, we should be clear about what we're actually saying yes to, because to some people, they'll say we voted to change school start times, just so that we're really
No, if we
cautious
vote
about-
on a school start time study, that's what we would be voting.
And that's the vote, that's it, just the study.
That's what it would have to be.
It would have to be,
Okay.
because we don't know what the study's gonna.
Right.
Clean.
And you said there's no expenditure included in that?
No, there is expenditure.
Yeah, I thought I heard you say there isn't.
There isn't enough that warrants, just by dollar amount alone, necessitates board action.
Okay,
It's under,
okay.
okay?
Yep.
No, the last couple pages show that.
Sorry, I had to take a phone call, so I may have missed all that.
Well, let me bring you up to speed. Read the last 2 pages.
Okay.
So
And
if we
anyway,
just
so then,
put this
do we
to
want
a
to,
action item for
on
Yeah.
the 17th?
Yes.
So
We
we
could
could
do that, and I would, thank you, I would invite any feedback and
Yeah, I think that's a
information
great idea.
to send it my way or
Yeah.
Sandy's, and then we'll make sure that it gets included. I think the goal is to make it as inclusive as
Yeah,
possible,
yeah,
so
yeah.
this is a framework.
Right.
And I think what I appreciate working with Jeff is that it is intended to be customized to meet the needs and the request of what the board is looking for, and that's our goal, is to deliver that, so.
Very good.
All right.
All right, well, have a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, our next discussion item is the transition program.
And they're such good guys.
Good afternoon. I'd like to, evening. Here I go again.
At least it's not good morning, so we're doing okay.
Not yet, anyway.
Right.
To expand upon the first presentation by Kim Shannock and Amy Fish, we've asked the team from the special ed department to come and join us and talk to you about what's going on in the world of transition. So I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Claudia Henriksen to introduce her team.
Thank you. We are so happy to be here. Me in particular, I recall the board saying that they really like to hear from staff that are in the buildings rather than the people here at DOB. So I am proud to have 3 of what are many, many other professionals in this district that are hardworking, student-centered, and innovative in their thinking for students with disabilities to ensure that they are college, career, and community ready. I have, to my far left here, I have Shane McDonough, who is a work experience teacher at East High School. I have Jen Bourget, who is our newest addition, and she is our program support teacher for programs for individuals with intellectual disabilities, coming to us with a lot of background in the area of transition, so welcome addition. And to my right, I have Wanda Bronsett, who has whose history and background of what's going on in Green Bay and what has occurred in Green Bay has been invaluable. And she is a work experience teacher at Preble. Today they are here to talk about the transition programs that are going on in our district for students with disabilities. And one thing I want to make sure that you recognize, and I think you will see that through their presentation, is that these 3 do their darndest to keep me on my toes. Every time they come through my door, they've got new ideas for how we can improve the lives and the futures of our students with disabilities. So at this point, I will turn it over to them.
Great. I'm very excited to be here. It's my first board meeting, and I was a bit nervous, but after being able to sit for the last little while.
The last 7 hours you've relaxed.
Nothing like
Good,
icing
Shane,
the
I'm
kickers
glad.
here. Yeah, no, it's all grand. As you can see, it takes a large team to collaborate together to improve outcomes for the students that we serve in our district. And the conversations, they're not always easy. With growth, there can be discomfort. And we've experienced some of that. But I would say that more than anything, we are working tirelessly to improve outcomes for the students and families we serve, and that we are collaborating to improve the way in which we're delivering those services. We're working very closely as a team with community agencies as our partners to foster the success of the students that we serve.
Right. So there are 20 indicators around special education that our state collects information on, and 4 of those indicators focus on transition and post-school outcomes for our students with disabilities. So a big one that we as a team have been looking at is indicator 14 data. The post-school outcomes report looks at the percentage of youth who have individual educational plans but are no longer in secondary school because they have exited for whatever reason, who have been employed, enrolled in some type of post-secondary school, or both, within 1 year of exiting high school.
And when she says exited for one reason or another, she means either graduation or they aged out at the age of 21.
So we can celebrate that the percentage of our special education students who are engaged in post-secondary activities is comparable to our state average. And when we are doing our data dig, we discovered, though, that only half of our students with autism who responded to the survey are engaged. And as we discussed the current transition services that are provided within our district, we realized that resources and services are offered inconsistently to students across disability categories. We applied for 2 transition grants so that we could be allowed more collaboration time between important stakeholders to support the improvement of transition services offered to increase the positive post-school outcomes for all of our students.
So along with the 2 grants that we were awarded this year, the Department of Public Instruction has advocated for the addition of the Special Education Transition Incentive Grant, there's a mouthful, to the state budget. As the funding stands currently, we receive $1,000 for every student that is actively engaged in post-secondary education or training and or competitively employed 1 year after high school. So we're actually getting a return on investment for positive post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. So as you can see, last year we had 74 students that completed the survey and were eligible for this incentive grant. This year we had 100 students out of the 115 that were surveyed that are actively engaged 1 year after high school. Our goal for 2019 is to double our return on investment. This year we had 240 students that could have been surveyed, and so as we're prepping for the survey for next year, our goal is to make sure that we have updated contact information and accurate contact information so that we can get more of those students to respond to that survey. I should say young adults, they're no longer our students, right?
Right. So when she says return on investment, that $100,000 comes back to us as revenue.
So we're pretty excited about that. It's not often that, special ed is getting money for good things, right? It's usually to provide much needed reactive support. So we're really excited that we can be getting money back into our district for doing our jobs well, right? That's really what it boils down to. Any questions around that at all? Like we didn't? No? Perfect. And the link is there. We don't need to go to it tonight. If you wanted to learn more about the Transition Incentive Grant, it's all on the DPI website for you.
Or you could just talk to Jen, because she knows so much about it. I got to brag. Jen comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. Jen has worked tirelessly in the state and knows the other side of this coin, working for the Transition Improvement Grant team, the TIG team at the state level. So we're glad to have her. So what we're doing
to say that.
Yeah, well, yeah. What are we doing to improve outcomes? We applied. We worked with Kim. I don't know if she's still here or not.
Kim Shannon.
Kim Shannon, and there was a large team that started, and we all got together and we wrote a transition readiness grant. Now, we were one of 33 districts in our state to be awarded, out of over 140. So that's to be celebrated. Only 33 got awarded funds, and we were one of them. We didn't get everything we asked for, but nobody did. So the Wisconsin Transition Improvement Grant awarded us $27,000 to review our post-school outcomes data and develop a plan to increase the transition services and experiences that the district is providing to students with disabilities. And we looked specifically at that post-school outcomes data, and we found the gap. The gap was students specifically with autism that were not engaged. And we developed a plan, a pretty comprehensive plan, to improve outcomes for those students. And by the way, the supports that we're providing those students helps all students with disabilities. It's not just those with autism. So the majority of the grant's plan includes work to build capacity among district staff, engage families in discussions about transition, topics and the processes, and build stronger relationships with outside agencies.
The other grant that we applied for was called the Partners with Business Grant. The Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities awarded us $5,000 to the district so that we could implement the Partners with Business model. And it basically is what it says. It allows for more natural supports, you may know as job coaching for people with disabilities on the job. I'm the work experience coordinator, as is Shane, and we provide systematic instruction on the job and fade gradually as a student learns all the tasks that they need. Well, with this model, we're able to fade our coaching as soon as the student has mastered the skills, and then that intermittent coaching that is necessary would be provided through the business, you know, with the supervisors there or even just a coworker. And the employer is trained on strategies to that are effective working with people with disabilities in general, as well as specifically with the individual that is hired within their company.
When we thought of this, we thought of Marv from Doris Chevrolet this summer. He was the supervisor for our students, our first group of students to go through It's All in the Details, which is learning how to do car detailing at a car dealership. And Marv was their supervisor, and he just naturally knew how to support the students, and with a little bit of coaching would have probably been continue to be phenomenal at that. And so we said, ding, 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 Marv, right away. So
Yeah.
As we move forward, that's going to be one of the businesses we might tap into for further training.
Several of us were at the certificate award ceremony at Doors. So it's very impressive.
They loved Mark.
They did, they did.
Okay, so what else is in the works around our transition work this year so far? Well, in the past 3 months, we have made significant changes in the way that transition is being talked about. For example, the director of DVR services in Brown County has been attending transition planning meetings to help make sure that her vocational counselors are keeping regular hours in each of our high school buildings and meeting with more students with disabilities starting in 10th grade. Because of this collaboration, we will have at least 27 students participating in their Job Explorer activity that will be taking place in our Green Bay high schools for the first time. In previous years, Green Bay would have averaged about 6 to 8 students in the Job Explorer program, so we have quadrupled our enrollment this year, which is amazing. And we're getting students at a younger age versus waiting until they're the 18 to 21 category. It has been difficult to find the time to provide quality professional development around transition. Special education teachers are getting an average of 5 minutes worth of transition updates in their monthly department meetings. This is not enough time to build capacity and collaborate about effective practices and the individualized needs of their students. So of course we would always love more time, right? More time for PD, more time to collaborate and share ideas and problem solve. So another good thing that's happening, Wanda will be starting the transition certificate program at UW-Whitewater in January.
And that's part of the grant funding, by the way.
Yes, so the grant will...
district is not paying for that.
Nope.
She will be completing an action research project around transition and ways to improve career, community, and college readiness for all students. As a team, we have completed a transition improvement plan to help decide which activities we wanted to focus on this year. And let me tell you, it was a full-time job reining everybody in and saying, we have a year. We can't take on too much or we won't get anywhere, right? So in the spring, we will be reviewing our plan to see where we have grown and to make a plan for the 2019-2020 school year. We are happy to share this plan with you if you are interested. One thing we know for sure, we cannot let this work and the energy it has created fade, even if the grant for 2019 and 20 is not there to fund us.
So one thing that we are doing next month, January 24th, we are inviting community businesses to join in a conversation about increasing employment of people with disabilities. You're welcome to join us. as well as invite anyone that you know who is a business owner who is interested in increasing the workforce within our community. Our next steps are to continue building transition successes, and our dream is to develop a student center for transition.
So this is our dream, because if you think about it, creating a separate community-based location for students who are 18, 19, 20, and 21 is truly inclusive. Right now, the way we have our system set up is that if a student is eligible to stay in our district until age 21, most are returning to the high schools, which they've been a part of for the past 4 years, so years 5, 6, and 7.
Where they already walked across the stage.
When they already walked across the stage. So you're asking a young adult who's grown with peers to stay in that setting. We want to have a conversation and maybe change that. We want to create that separate community integrated space with easy access to events, businesses, and recreational opportunities for those 18 to 21-year-olds. We want to be able to provide apartment-style independent living skills training. We want to also continue to develop our employability skills training and entrepreneurship, which is a new emerging, I think, fascinating opportunity as we empower these young adults to be businessmen and business owners themselves. We want to be considering a dual enrollment organization and academic support program. Think of it as a bridge program, if you will, for those students that might need additional help getting to the next step at NWTC or UWGB. We want community-focused related services of OT, PT, and speech. You know, I had the privilege last week of meeting some of our grade school staff at Langley, and we went swimming. I had a great little buddy that I was swimming with. And one of the great side conversations I had with one of the speech therapists, or the PTOT, when we talked about the possibility in the future of maybe doing this, and their eyes lit up and they said, oh, it would be wonderful to be able to be in one central location. We wouldn't have to drive around so much. So I just think that there are potential benefits to this we haven't even considered. And of course, we want to help build capacity for community partners to hire and support our students with disabilities. With that said, Claudia, can you close it out for us?
Sure. I just want to also let you know that we've already had our kickoff meeting, and it was very well attended. We had it was at East, right?
East, yeah.
It was at, I was there, I'm sorry. It was at East, and we had lots of parents, lots of conversations. We had, the DVR was there, and that was kicking off the grant, the first piece of the grant. We also have another event tomorrow where it's going to be, believe it or not, at East again. That's because it's very centralized. And that is going to be teaching parents about guardianship. Huh? Plus it's...
I'm sure that's not the only reason.
No. Only because I have 3 East jerseys. I don't know. My side note, my children go to Southwest and they joke to their friends about, look at my mom's closet and see what's in there. Red Devils, yes. But anyways, so tomorrow, what time is that?
Well, okay, so we're doing a little bit of a dinner for the families that are attending. Starts at 5. We have Mary Rose Orcutt, who's an attorney here based in town that practices elder law, who's going to come and present to our families to talk about options for families regarding guardianship and supported decision-making.
So any questions for any of you, from anybody?
Ed.
Not questions so much as comments, and I have a few. And first of all, thank you so much for what you do. I look at the list of names on page 3 of your presentation, and I only wish that they could all be here to hear this. In addition to some, folks on there who I know, who I've worked with, I think about others I've worked with in the past who are work experience teachers: Greg McGee, Mary Vandenbush, Kim Stone, Tara Bruckner, still working on there. Some of the finest, kindest, best-hearted people I've ever known. We spend a lot of time talking about some wonderful things that we do. We talk about turbocharge, we talk about personalized pathways, CEP, AP. We saw a presentation where there's a goal of our students, all of our students coming out of school being able to earn at least 200% of the poverty level, what have you. But I look at the work that you folks are doing, and I would suggest that anybody who thinks in any way, shape, or form that our schools are failing need to look at the work that you are doing. It's amazing. And a suggestion to my fellow board members, if you have never taken an opportunity to go alongside, to go next to a work experience teacher on a site, you need to do it. If you want to see what the best of education is, that's where you see it. A couple of quotes that I thought about while I saw this coming up. But recently there was a big summit at the United Nations, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, said something along the lines of, everyone has a moral imperative to uphold the rights of persons with disabilities. I think what you're doing, it goes far beyond that. And possibly be a little more secular, I'm going to quote the book that we're all familiar with. I'll paraphrase it. There's a phrase in there, there's a quote in there that goes something along the lines of, what you have done for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have done for me. And whenever I worked with Mary Vandenbush or Kim Stone, or I've had my conversations with Greg McGee after he was done with that, saw some of the students, some of the work that he did, I thought about that a lot. There's a special place in the cosmos, in the heaven, for what you're doing. And I just can't be effusive enough saying thank you for everything you're doing for those kids. It's amazing work. It's tireless work, and God bless you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. You hired us, right?
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
In terms of housing, I know you talked a little bit about the life skills and the housing, but are you finding that the students have appropriate access to housing if they're in this transitional period, and or is there a plan also to moving forward with some of our business partners to help find better housing for these individuals?
I think when they're talking about housing, he was speaking more to independent living skills. So the housing issue, the DVR and ADRC, Aging and Disability Resource Center, would help them work with that, and making sure when they're hooked up with the DVR, the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, that's a strand that they would work on.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
I do think, though, a lot of our parents of students with intellectual disabilities are worried about their son or daughter living with a roommate, living on their own in an apartment. So the more that we can train and teach those skills and show them they can be successful doing independent things, they could be successful living on their own, I think that's going to open the doors for a lot more students to have that opportunity. One of the things we took, one thing we did with the grant so far is we took a large group of students and toured NWTC, and all of them wanted to know where they could live on campus.
All of them.
They want to be out of their homes, right?
And their parents want them out too.
Some not. It's that cutting the cord kind of a thing. But the kids want to be independent. So how are we as a district supporting that? And how do we help parents realize, hey, they've got the skills now. We've helped them get those skills. They can use the city bus. They can use a grocery store. They're communicating functionally to get what they need in the community. Let's not put up any more barriers, than necessary. So
absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
Michelle.
One thing that I have really come to see firsthand is the passion and the inspiration that you have afforded our students. And I can't tell you how it brings, it really speaks volumes of the commitment and the desire and the belief in each and every child that is being served. It's extraordinary, and you can see such joy, and I can't tell you how inspired I feel when I walk away from our students when I see how they grow and how successful they are and the contributions they're making in just short periods of time. They can make great strides, because if we work together and believe in every child being served, it's amazing what kids can do. It's amazing what all of our kids can do, and I've seen it firsthand, and I thank you for that.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Ms. Maloney, if I can, real quick, just publicly acknowledge and note that I'm very proud of the work that this team does.
Duly noted. Thank you, Vicki. We knew that. We figured that out. All right, our next item is to schedule superintendent's performance evaluation. Get your calendars out.
So I'm looking at potentially the 14th. I didn't check with you.
14th of January?
Yeah.
I can do that.
Say again, please.
14th of
14th of January.
It's a Monday night without a board meeting.
Our board meetings are the 7th and the 21st of
What
January.
are we scheduling, Katie? I'm sorry.
Michelle's evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
What time she say?
We haven't set a time yet. We're trying to see if everybody.
So we're looking at Monday, the 14th. Okay? Christina?
Seems fine right now.
Okay, Andrew?
Yep.
Ed?
Yes.
Laura, yes.
Michelle?
Yep.
Okay, Brenda?
Yes.
Okay, it's a go. What time?
Anybody have a preferred time?
5 sounds good.
5
Can
works?
we do 5:30?
5:30 works.
30 sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, so 5:30 on the 14th.
Right. Okay, there, we've recaptured 4 minutes. All right, we have 3 more discussion items. 1, supplemental funds available to increase program hours in the Head Start grant. I know Sally was here.
I am.
There you are, and you're still here.
here.
And with a smile on her face, thank you, Sally.
I had a cookie, thank you, it was so good.
Oh,
It saved me.
Well, then Sally's
See?
happy.
And
Told you that
on
would
the
come
table,
in
we have
handy.
Sally
Christina.
Jensen and Ann Barsh, Executive Director for Elementary.
Good.
They've been working very hard on this grant, and you'll hear a bit about it.
It's been a group effort. We received information in, was it September? That there was the availability of additional funds for Head Start, and those funds are for expanding the school day for students, which was the grant that we wrote last time. And by we, I mean Sally. You know,
I
some of
get
us
help.
put our fingers in it, but she really is the key in that. And so I'll let Sally just explain. the
So
grant.
we got the email, or I got the email, I believe Michelle did too, I almost deleted it. But then,
We're glad you did.
thinking, oh my goodness, gonna do this again.
the start of the
But it's
school
been
year.
so successful since we opened the Head Start Learning Center and started the full day services for 68 of our 336 kids. And this opportunity to add additional spots for full day services was one we just felt we couldn't pass up. So I submitted the grant on November 30th, which was last Friday. It was due on the first Saturday. And the total amount came to $2,832,776. So large amount. Some of the differences from this grant compared to the one we received for a little over $2.6 million 2 years ago. The program operations, the amount of staff that would be needed for another location, whereas 2 years ago, we had so many staff, we moved over from St. Peter and Paul into the new site. So hiring an administrator, the new teachers, clerical, facility technician, so the program operations is the piece, if we were to receive this grant, that is on your, that is given to you each year with your continuation grant. It's the startup cost that would be a one-time startup, and that would be to renovate an existing building and then to order additional supplies for technology, classroom, and such. The conditions of this grant are quite different than they were 2 years ago. First of all, you had to be eligible to write the grant, and we did fit in one condition of 7. We were condition 4, in that we do not offer full-day services for more than 45% of our total enrollment. We only currently offer for a little over 20%. So I've requested an additional 20%, an additional 68 spots, which would bring us to a total of 136. The other difference is that conditions 1 through 3 are targeted for the early Head Start or birth to 3 population, early Head Start and child care partnerships. So the federal government is really putting money into that birth to 3 population. And of course, we don't have early Head Start in Green Bay Public Schools. They are giving the money out, the $295 million, according to conditions. So once that $295 million is gone, and so if it's dispersed between conditions 1, 2, and 3, I wouldn't even have a chance. We wouldn't have a chance at this grant being condition 4. We just don't know how many are applying throughout the United States, so we just wait and see. And we've been told we'll know by March 1st if we receive the grant.
And again, we've got the, part of the grant is for the startup costs, but then the operational costs, that's sustainable because we would continue to get the money from Head Start.
Correct.
We don't have to.
Correct. Yes, correct, absolutely. They add that money yearly
Good.
to your grant.
I think it's important to mention too that our goal with the extended days is to offer extended days on the west side of Green Bay. It's all extended are at the Head Start Learning Center on Bellevue. So this is really also an equity issue for our families that are on the west side.
Yes, thanks for offering that. And our first year data with our full day 4-year-old English speakers compared to our part day have really shown some wonderful results, particularly in the areas of literacy and math. So we're really excited with the kindergarten readiness skills these kids are developing, and we have so many additional families that want full day services. So it would be a great opportunity, and yes, Ann's correct, we would target West Side families this time.
Any questions for Sally and Ian? Comments?
Good luck.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, fingers crossed.
You know, I do need to make a comment about Sally.
Oh,
And the
goodness,
fact
you
that
always
here
do.
she is a principal of a school, started the school year, and she's writing this massive grant. And we are very fortunate that many people, many departments came in and supported and did that. But it's always Sally who does the
Takes
work,
the
who's in the
lead. Yep.
enterprise system, is that what it's
Yes,
called?
in the Head
That
Start.
she's the only person who can put her fingers in there. And so her commitment to this is really remarkable. And the last grant you wrote, we were like, well, what the heck?
Yeah, right, never
So,
know.
It could
So,
be.
2 times
Very
the charm. We'll see.
appreciated.
So-
Yes.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki.
All right. Proposed course updates for the 2019-20 school year.
And we have several updates, and coming to the board table is Mr. Mike Fries, our Executive Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Mike.
I'm actually here for 2 reasons tonight. The first one, as I'm sure the board's well aware, I am widely known as a successful coach of runner-up Powder Puff football squads at Preble over the years, and so do I have your support as I prepare my application for the open head coaching position down on 1265?
Have at it.
Hey, go for it.
Just kidding. I'm here tonight with some proposed course updates for the 2019-20 school year. This was the recommended approach at this time last year. It was well received by the board, so I'm back again this year. As the memo I submitted indicates, this is the time of the year where school scheduling is getting ready for students and staff. And so the items included for your consideration are a part of some of the annual collection of things we sometimes find ourselves needing to address as scheduling season really hits and as staffing timelines approach. So that our published information in the annual course book is accurate and schools have the most up-to-date information. Many of the courses we've included for your consideration tonight have just some simple kind of technical or naming convention adjustments, but a few, of course, are a little bit more in-depth. The one thing that I would say that they all definitely have in common is that they are reflective of our district priorities, both the formally stated ones and those that are implied by our mission, vision, and strategic directions. The courses that are included here are reflective, as always, of the work of our curriculum coordinators in conjunction with the instructional staff and our partner post-secondary institutions, and of course our administrative assistants who help us stay on track and accurate with what we provide you. As always, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions that you may have regarding the courses listed for your consideration tonight, and I recognize there are many.
Any questions or Comments? Andrew?
I just have one. So it looks like we're doing more with accelerated language arts, which looks like a good thing to do. My only concern would be, and this is right now, this is anecdotal. I didn't do too deep of a study into it, but what do we are we ensuring for things like advanced language arts that students who are at the right point educationally are taking these courses, or is there sometimes such a deference towards parental choice and not discouraging a challenge that there might be kids who are taking advanced ELA that aren't ready? And this is especially relevant if we're making ELA more rigorous. Again, that's not any, I'm not saying I think there's a pervasive problem or anything, just some anecdotal things I've heard about maybe kids going into advanced ELA because the parent feels they should be in advanced ELA when maybe it's maybe that would be a challenge better for a future year, and you should.
That's a great question. I appreciate that. Part of this process is working with our middle schools collectively to ensure that we have clarity around the types of predictive data points that would suggest, hey, this might be a great fit for you, so that people can make as informed of a choice as possible without introducing barriers or gates that would lead to a lack of equity or access. It is a fine line. We do believe that at the middle school level, because there's a chance to circle back around at the high school level if, hey, I took on a challenge and it didn't quite work out the way I wanted, that it isn't like you're suddenly behind on the route to graduation. But it's a very important piece of this for sure.
And that's fair, and I'm certainly not, there are reasons someone might not be strong at test taking, someone might be in the later stages of acquiring the English language, and that might not reflect well on their testing, but yet language arts overall. So I get those things, but I would think just as a basic starting point, I wouldn't say never, but I would think it would be rare that a student would be appropriate for advanced ELA if their reading lexicals aren't even at grade level.
I would agree.
And again, these are just some things I've heard bits and pieces of, and I don't want to have that frustrates kids, teachers, and the class. That said, I think let's make it available for kids, but let's do it in ways that make the most sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move that forward. Thank you, Mike.
And I'm not applying for the Packers job, so it's okay.
And our last discussion item on this work session is the graduation ceremony policy.
In front of you, you have proposed changes to policy 345.62. This policy revision is coming to you at the request of the Inner-City Student Council, and Jamie may want to speak to this after I've introduced this. Last year, we brought forward revisions to the policy that allowed students to wear adornments for cultural and religious purposes. That request came forward from some of our cultural groups. And we worked with the principals to put that in effect, have an approval process in place to ensure that we are still following dress code and that we're not infringing on students' First Amendment rights. The ICSE has now requested that we remove the condition of the adornment being for cultural or religious purposes, and that adornments be allowed for all students. The process would remain the same. There would be a approval process by the principals. Students are required to submit their request for the adornment to the principal ahead of graduation. the principal or associate principals approve that, and then it can't be changed prior to graduation. If it's changed, they're not allowed to have that adornment on their cap or gown. And the principal has the right if it's going to cause a material disruption, just like under our dress code policy, that the student would not be able to wear that adornment. Jamie, do you have anything to add? Okay.
Any comments, questions?
My question is for Jamie. Do you feel like the way that this is written gets to the heart of what the students were speaking to in that meeting? And
yeah, I think
okay.
so. I didn't bring it forward. One of our other students did, but the discussion was mainly around just that we didn't feel like there was an issue behind it, and so it was something that we felt like wasn't necessary to be in place anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Hearing none, move that forward, and that concludes teaching and learning work session.
All right, thank you, Katie. Next is organizational support, and that'll be facilitated by Andy Becker.
All right, under discussion only items, under business and finance we have none, and under human resources we have none. Under discussion and public comment, we have several items. Under business and finance, we have access to public records, procedures rule, 823R, and fee schedule, exhibit 823.
We are bringing this forward to you tonight. Recently, the Department of Justice issued a memorandum regarding fees charged for public records requests and advised records custodians to examine their fee schedule to ensure that you are only charging the actual cost that it takes to reproduce a record. Many fee schedules were put in place years ago when copying costs were much more expensive than they are now with our multifunction copiers. The DOJ put out a revised fee schedule that they went through the process of looking at what it costs to reproduce records. So we did the same. We worked with Jake Alverson in purchasing to figure out what it costs for a black and white copy, a color copy, DVD copy, a DVD, or a thumb drive or a file to be given the records on. And as you can see, the costs are greatly reduced compared to what our current policy and rule provides, which is 25 cents a copy. Our current rule does not differentiate between any of the other mediums that we could now provide records on. And so we have added that to the fee schedule. We're recommending that you adopt the exhibit, which closely mirrors the exhibit that the DOJ has put together with respect to the fee schedule. What we have been doing, to a large extent, we use a secure file transfer for transmitting documents. It's called Send This File, and so we have been largely using electronic transfer of records anyway. We have not been providing a lot of physical copies of records unless that has been requested. The Send This File is very convenient for the receiver and for us in order to transmit those records.
Any questions on that? Okay, we'll move that forward. And then access to public records procedures rule, 823R.
That's what we just did, Andrew.
But we did the fee schedule. Are we doing it all at once?
Oh, I'm sorry, is it two different motions?
Well, so I have, that's three attachments on one, that's one item with three attachments?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, public gifts to the schools, policy and rule, 840 and 840R.
This policy is a companion to the next item that's on your agenda for the booster clubs and parent organizations policy. We have looked at our public gifts to school policy, and we really need to make sure that any of the gifts that we're receiving from outside organizations are consistent with our anti-discrimination requirements as well as our requirements under Title IX. So when we accept those gifts, we need to make sure that we're not discriminating against any protected class, as well as ensuring equity across various different organizations on the basis of sex. So with respect to the changes in policy 840, really, we just put it in standard format. There's not too many substantive changes, but since we were bringing the rule, we wanted to put that policy in our standard format. And then with respect to the rule, it was to add that anti-discrimination language, that when we do accept gifts, that we are ensuring that they are not discriminatory in any manner.
Laura?
Melissa, excuse me. Can you offer like an example of what that would be?
Yes. And really, this example could fall either under this policy or under the next policy. It could be, so for example, boys and girls basketball. Here in the district, we have done an extensive study as to how many coaches each of our teams need. There may be more coaches needed for football than there's needed for basketball or softball or baseball. Booster clubs are very generous in wanting to donate dollars for additional coaches, and we need to be sure that we are having those coaches on an equitable basis. So if we're adding a coach for boys basketball, it needs to be consistent with how many boys are out for basketball. It doesn't mean that we can't have an extra coach for boys basketball and not have one for girls basketball. It just needs to be consistent with a formula as to how coaches are allocated based on participation. This hasn't happened here, but down in the Milwaukee area, locker rooms were extensively renovated and turned into really, really nice locker rooms. We need to make sure that if we're doing renovations in the girls' locker room, we're doing the same renovation in the boys' locker room. Updates to equipment. So if we are providing new equipment for one sport, we're providing similar upgrades. And here in the district, Tim Flood and all of our activities directors have a really good system in place of rotations. So our uniforms are on rotations and to ensure equitable distribution of new uniforms. Our equipment is on rotations, the lifespan of equipment, that sort of thing. But we just want to make sure that when those donations do come in place, that we are using an equitable process in applying those donations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brenda?
And so it pertains to booster clubs too in terms of how they spend their money. Now, I know I was on the East High School Booster Club. We didn't always have a ton of money. So one year we might invest in golf bags for, actually that was both boys and girls, that's a bad example. One year, we might invest in something for the boys football team. That's all the money we have.
Sure.
Does it have to be simultaneous equality or over the course of how many years? Does it have to even out to making sure that it satisfies the Title IX?
And I'm glad you raised East, because what's nice about East is there's one booster club for all of the activities at East. So that makes it a little bit more manageable as far as the equitable distribution. And as you're looking at, this year we have money set aside for this, so next year we're going to do this. It is looked at not just 1 year in isolation. It gets a little trickier when schools have booster clubs for individual sports, because some booster clubs are really, really organized and do a really nice job of fundraising, and we just need to make sure that while they have done that great job of fundraising, that we're not tilting the scale and not being equitable to all of our activities. But East is a great model for how it works, and it works well.
Katie?
How do you balance the equity issue when we have some schools that are in a much better position to support things through their booster clubs than some of our other schools?
Ellen Krieger, who is our Title IX coordinator, and I just had this conversation today. That's hard, but we have to do that right now. I think we've been able to fundraise in other areas and make sure that all of our teams are provided for, but that doesn't mean that they're getting the extra things that some of our kids in other schools where there is that financial assistance, what they're receiving. But that is definitely something on our radar screen, and I think Tim Flood and Ellen have been working to make sure that we're paying attention to that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I might have missed this, Melissa, so I apologize. Does this include PTO raised funding?
Policy 881.2
Okay.
does include PTOs.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? This wouldn't have thought of this if it didn't come up in discussion, but our marching band uniforms on a rotation?
I believe they are.
Okay. Could we get, is someone just verify and get back to us on that?
John, can you work with Tim?
Okay. Okay, anything else on this one, public gifts to the schools? All right, seeing none, we'll move that forward. And we have relations with booster clubs, parent organizations, policy and procedures, policy 881-2, rule 881-2R.
So this is the companion policy to what we were just discussing. This governs booster clubs and parent organizations. It provides clear guidelines for how to be a officially recognized parent group as well as a booster club. And then it discusses that equitable distribution of fundraised monies to our students and our schools.
Brenda?
I didn't see anything in here. Is there going to be, and I assume there's some expectation, especially at the elementary school level, I mean, the booster, well, no, at all levels, for the principals to make sure that their parent groups understand and realize that this policy exists?
Yep. Tim will work with the principals in rolling this policy out once
Okay.
it's, yes.
Okay. Can it, and I don't know if it's the parent organizations turn over, regularly, especially in terms of leadership and just membership and things like that. And should there be something in here that just says yearly, this will be reviewed with the parent organizations, just so it doesn't get forgotten?
We can do that.
And then actually,
Sure, go ahead.
I was curious if you could just give me an example. There's a section in here about any booster club or parent organization that wants to use the district name, a district school's name, or district school's mascot name, has to obtain approval. And what's the background for that, and how does that look in terms of just, if someone wants to do that, what are they going to have to do to make that happen?
So all of our logos and our names, so East Red Devils, all of that is trademarked, and you need permission to be able to use that. Our booster clubs like to use the mascots, like to use those names on their social media when they're soliciting funds. But we want to make sure, we have unfortunately had situations where a rogue, unrecognized booster club has set up social media accounts and has been soliciting funds, and they were not officially approved through the school. So it's working with the activities director to gain that approval to use those trademarks in order to include those. And it's consistent too with our social media policy to be getting permission to use the trademarked logos and mascots when you're having that on a social media account.
Okay. And then, so if they're printing T-shirts or like stuff the
Yes.
networks sell, oftentimes
We've
it's-
granted permission to have the logos on cakes, I mean, just all sorts of things of.
And that's just a matter of getting permission from the principal?
The principal activities director, Lori's office, provides the permission. We've sent form letters on file at, for example, Meyer, so that they have permission on hand that they can use our logos to make cakes, those sorts of things.
Oh, okay. And how long have we been requiring that?
It was in place before I got here.
Okay.
It was a system that was in place before I got here.
Okay. Because I don't think it was in place when I was doing PTO and Booster Club. I don't recall, but anyways, somewhere.
talking right now.
You'll end up in trademark jail.
I don't know that things were, well, no, I don't know that, well, and I wasn't in charge of the T-shirt stuff, so maybe they were doing that, I just didn't know.
The booster clubs, we encourage our booster clubs to use our recognized vendors because that we have a contract in place so that they earn extra dollars back, and then that feeds into our fundraised accounts. So they already have permission if they're using those vendors.
Melissa, I have another question for you real quick, sorry. In terms of
how parent organization and booster clubs can spend the money. Do you, other than this, are there other policies, their guidance? Because we don't have to go into that now, but I'm just curious. You can point me in that direction.
The accounting department has guidelines with respect to best practices, with respect to fundraising, how many people should be on the accounts, checks and balances, those sorts of things.
What they can purchase as well, or no?
No, we don't oversee that. I mean, if you're going to be purchasing food, that needs to be consistent with the wellness policy. If you're going to be purchasing.
Consistent with other policies.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Jean, did you have your hand up? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just curious because I've heard some schools where they're fundraise for staff positions.
I'm not aware
And
of that.
it's just been interesting because they've talked about how that's created significant equities of staffing because parents have sort of fundraised to.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, so I was just.
I think
It's
Aldo
some-
was the only school that did that.
What did you?
Aldo did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's only
There's-
one
It's the only
position
one.
that I can think of that is like a very, very small part of a position that was, there was some parent volunteer money that was put towards.
Was that for like a community involvement position?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I just didn't know if we had any guidance on that. Something to consider. Yep.
We would want to make sure that we had equity as well. for that.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, then we'll move that forward. Then we have 200 human resources. The first one is the benefit enhancements.
Thank you. I'm pleased to bring forward 3 additions to our benefits that I think will be very well received by our employees. The first is to recommend to drop the $5 user fee for our on-site health and wellness center. Currently, we do charge that, and we believe that it would increase the usage of that. We are not at full capacity, and we would like to get closer to that. The second is the opening up Bell and Near site primary care clinics in Ashwaubenon, Bellevue, Howard, and West De Pere. There would be no cost for employees, and we estimate that per visit, the savings would be about $99. So what we're looking at is if an employee went to a regular primary care physician, the average cost that Bellin provided us was $154.56. Our average charge for our employees would be $55 based on an average visit at the primary care clinics for a $99.56 estimated savings. And then the third is to open up Bellin Near Site Physical Therapy at Ashwaubenon and the Bellevue sites. And there would be a $10 copay for our employees and families who are on the plan. And the estimated cost savings per visit that Bellin provided us was $43.75. An average therapy visit is $75, and our cost at one of their clinics would be $31.25. So if you're supportive of this, we'll bring these forward to the 3 different recommendations, memos or motions to the board in 2 weeks. Any questions?
Katie?
Just a quick question, the PT part, that's a prescribed service.
You know, I thought so too, and actually now, with the higher level of providers, they have doctorates, they're actually open, they call it open access. So that allows an employee.
So these are just self-referrals and people go without a prescription?
Yes, so you do not have to have a physician's order, which had been the case.
Right.
So we think that people who might have something that they think is wrong with them will first go to physical therapy, and oftentimes that can be very helpful or prevent some testing that might not be necessary at that time. And of course, they'll certainly refer employees and their family members to a physician if that's necessary.
Okay.
That's, assessment part of the therapy.
Interesting.
Other questions? And I had talked with Jean a couple of times about this, and there's this is probably a situation where making something available at a lower cost for the employee actually brings the cost lower across the district. We have, especially when we're paying for our clinic downstairs to be staffed full-time, if it's being used 50%, and eliminating the copay can get that already paid for person used 100% of the day, then that's definitely these appear to be all revenue positive trade-offs for the district, and if they turned out not to be, then we could certainly review that. Right. Anything else on that? All right, then we have the employee handbook policy 253.2.
In working on the policies that we brought last month to you for the hiring, we recognized that we did not have a policy on the handbook, which the policy adopts the handbook as board policy and requires a system in place for revisions to that handbook. So codifies that the board must adopt any changes to the handbook, that the board adopts the handbook. So we're bringing forward that policy for you tonight to consider, just formalizing the staff handbook and putting that procedure in place, a process we've already have been doing, but just puts that in place in board policy. Jean, do you have anything to add?
No.
Is there anyone? Is there anything currently that would fall into the category of the board designating particular sections or provisions of the handbook as administrative? Or does that concept not exist until this policy is passed anyways?
Not sure I understand.
So B2, process for amendment of employee handbook. So it's B2B. The board may designate particular sections or provisions as administrative rules, procedures, and then if the board does that, then whatever sections they designated that way can be suspended, repealed, or removed. So the board can designate parts of the employee handbook as changeable without board approval.
We're not proposing that, and currently the handbook is not written that way.
Okay, so why is it in there?
Well, I can envision that there may be some language in the future that you may, for example, our administrative rules right now, board policy is required to bring forward to adopt changes, but administrative rule does not have to be brought forward to make changes. So it would be following a similar format with respect to our board policy and administrative rules.
Okay, I don't know if I like it or not, but I can at least have the explanation I can think about over the next couple.
So the question is to be or not to be.
Right.
But I think that from my perspective, we would have to be very clear that those sections were designated in that manner for us to be able to make any changes. And right now they are not, so it would not apply.
That section wouldn't apply.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll move that forward. And then we have a motion for a closed session. I move that the board adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which if discussed in public would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, law enforcement involvement with district parents. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, safety and well-being of staff. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session.
Second.
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.